Vibe coding's the future, at least according to Y Combinator. If you didn't already know this, I'm a YC founder and generally a pretty big fan of the stuff those guys do. I'm not going to say I'm a fan of everything and I can defend all the stuff going on, but generally speaking, I find the big drama around YC stuff to be misunderstandings as well as the wrong content getting to the wrong people, which will always cause weirdness. Speaking of weird, I'm not going to just watch their video about it. I'm going to watch Prime's reaction to it. I don't know if this is going to become a main channel video or not. We're going to see how we feel as we go through it. But if this does end up being a real video, we have to pay my editor for the work he's about to do. So let's hear a quick word from today's sponsor, then we'll dive in. Today's sponsor is a company that's doing basically everything wrong. They lower their prices, they give away all their code for free, and they make fun of themselves constantly. Hell, they named themselves Posthog. That's how little they care about running a good business. So if you want to take advantage of these guys as they screw themselves, you should check them out. Seriously though, it's such a good product. Chances are you can get away with their free tier because, again, they keep screwing themselves. And now they're paying me, a person who would have shilled them for free anyways because I've been using them for 4 years. You get the idea. These guys are doing everything wrong, but it makes it easier for me to run my channel, for me to run my business, and it'll probably help you out too. Here's the actual dashboard I use to keep track of T3 chat because Posthog is the only analytics we're using to actually know what's going on there. It's super easy for us to add to things like Next.js to have backend and front-end analytics that are resilient to ad blocks because I can route them through my own stuff. It's so nice getting these insights. When I talk to companies that aren't using Posthog, it's always one of two things. Either they're using a competitor and they're paying way too much money, or they don't have these numbers and they don't know how to talk about their users because they don't know what the users are actually doing. So if you're building a service with actual users, check these guys out. If you're building a service without actual users, fix that first, then check them out. Thank you to Posthog for sponsoring. Check them out today at soydev.link/posthog. Shout out to poor FaZe for figuring out how to turn this into a video.
All right, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're doing it. We're doing it. Vibe coding is the future. We're doing it. It's vibe coding.
It's like
we're gonna watch
it's
it.
like somebody dropped some giant beanstalk seeds at night. We woke up in the morning and there it is. Like, whoa,
what's going on? I mean, I think since right now this isn't a fad. This isn't going away.
I assume this is like
the dominant way to code, and if you're not doing it, like you might just be left behind.
I've always hated that statement, and a very, very simple reason why, and you'll get this from every last person, which is this. The exact same argument will be made. If you're not using it now, you're going to be left behind. You're like, oh, really? Well, does that mean AI is going to be like the same here in a year? And they're like, no. In the next few years, it's going to be so different. Like what you're doing now will be completely different the next couple years. And then you have to go, okay, wait a second. So if I learn it now, I have to relearn it anyways in a couple years. So in other words,
where do you guys think I stand on this? Do you think I'm on Gary's side or Prime's side on this disagreement? Where Gary thinks you're going to fall behind if you don't learn this now, Prime thinks it's going to change a whole bunch anyways. I am pumped you guys know me so well. I am 1000% on Prime's side. I have whole videos on this that nobody ever fucking watches. Thank you to Ronan for quoting it. It's good to be late. I say this all the time. I got into React 5-6 years after it came out, roughly. Halfway through React's current life. At the time, it felt like it had been around forever and it was about to be replaced. I got in around the same time Svelte 3 was happening. I was very late to React. I was there, I had started writing it more actively the week that hooks got announced. Being late isn't a bad thing. It's often actually a good thing because you can skip over all of the things we did wrong up until that point. There's a lot of assumptions that exist in any new tool or technology. And if you got into React half a year before hooks, you're worse off than somebody who got into React a month or two after them. Because you get to skip all the chaos of the class component stuff and go right into the better DX, the better way of doing things. Getting into stuff late has never hurt me. I was late to being a dev YouTuber, but instead a whole new type of dev YouTuber has started to exist since I started. And it's been awesome to watch. I was late to AI. I put out an AI chat app 2.5 years after ChatGPT, and it's still doing very well. Being late is often a good thing. And there is, the example I usually give is, funny enough, mobile development. Let's say you were really, really early on mobile. You knew as soon as smartphones started to happen that mobile was the future. So you decide, I'm going all in on mobile. We can agree that's a good idea. This, just in and of itself, solid statement, probably a good idea. I'm going all in on mobile, but the iPhone isn't out yet. You still know smartphones are going to be the future, that people are going to be doing more and more things on their phone and less on a big desktop clunky computer with a giant CRT. So you're going all in on mobile. I'm going to be the best mobile Java applet dev that ever lived. If you got into mobile too early, you got fucked. You got absolutely screwed. Because if you got into mobile so early that the existing app platforms that we have today didn't exist, you're worse off than somebody who waited a few years after the App Store came out and like, you know what? This mobile thing seems to be going pretty well. Maybe we should learn how to make apps for it. That's the difference. People who got in too early ended up learning the wrong things. Do you know where this was the case more than anywhere? YouTube. If you look at the top 100 creators from the first 5 years of YouTube, like 3 of them are active at all anymore. And of those 3, 2 of them bitch all the time about how the algorithm is ruining the platform and it's so terrible. The algorithm just follows what the people want. When they were there, it was so novel and the meta of making YouTube videos was so different that they learned the wrong way to make good videos. And now, when the bar has been risen and the expectations are different and the whole process has changed fundamentally, they're not better off because they're early. They're unable to learn the new way because they're so deeply ingrained in the wrong one. So, yeah, I don't agree. I love Gary. We were just talking 2 days ago. I do not agree with that sentiment. I do not think you are going to miss out terribly if you get into this a bit later. But if it's exciting to you, it's in a really good spot now. And some of the things you can do with these technologies are incredible. If you're already in VS Code, maybe give Cursor a shot. Maybe give Windsurf a shot. At the very least, give something that lets you try out these tools a shot. You don't have to, but you might be surprised. You might also not. You might just hate it and move off it. I moved off Cursor 3 times before I actually had it click for me and got more into it. You don't have to give these things a shot, though. Like if you saw Svelte when Svelte 3 dropped and you bet heavily on that, you would have been screwed. This stuff's a lot further along and you can get more from it. My point is that I totally agree with Prime here. You shouldn't feel like you are losing out or missing out if you don't try this stuff a little bit earlier.
Apparently, I can't catch up in a couple years. Like, I'm not really sure what you're trying to, like, what are you actually trying to sell me? Is it in its peak condition where if I learn it now, I'm like good for the future, or is it going to be completely different in the next couple years, right? It's just this weird argument that's made that I don't think makes, by the way, only 20 seconds into a video and I'm already pausing it. Here we go, boys. 33 minutes. This one's going to be a long one.
I am so sorry, guys.
All right, Light Cone. Let's go, Light Cone podcast. I love the editing, by the way.
Another episode of the Light Cone. I'm Gary. This is Jared.
Okay, I'll disagree with Prime. I hate the editing. I hate over-edited videos so much. Like intros, first 30 seconds, make it a little flashy to keep attention. From that point forward, all these fancy animations and shit, fuck it. Just put their name. Who cares?
Harj and Diana, and we're partners at Y Combinator. Collectively, we've funded companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars right when it was just an idea and a few people. So today we're talking about vibe coding.
This is weird for me because I do watch the YC channel a lot. I've seen the original video. I had feelings about the original video, but I always watch it at 1.5 to 2x. So this feels weird.
Which is from a Andre Karpathy post that went viral recently. There's a new kind of coding I call vibe coding, where you fully give in to the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that the code even exists.
Yeah, so we surveyed the founders in the current YC batch to get their take on vibe coding, and
I do like that every post you read now on chat, like on Reddit/ChatGPT or Reddit/ whatever it is, coding with LLMs, they're all like, help me! I'm 30 files into my program and everything's freezing and it constantly seems to break. I love vibe coding. You know, nothing seems to be better than having no expertise and just stop caring about where you are. Like you can imagine, you probably, like a lot of you've probably worked at a company that attempted to set, like, say, a pattern for how you like develop, try to effectively set like an architecture. And the decisions you've made even within that architecture had this crazy exponential climb for difficulty as time went on. So you reworked the architecture and it kind of flattened the curve a little bit. But then as time went on again, you were re-hitting like this exponential difficulty curve where every time you need to change something, it just starts ballooning and getting harder and more problems and weird side effects start happening. And you kind of see this thing happening over and over again. Now imagine you decided to go full vibes and you just didn't care about your architecture. I wonder where that would, like, I just wonder how long could you actually go, like in a realistic way. And maybe that's something that I need to try, is just like, how far could you actually get with vibe coding? Now we've tried to let,
Interesting. the vibe thing is like a tier system. Like how hard are you leaning into the vibe with vibe coding? Because I'm almost sad the term was taken the way it was for paying no attention to the code. Because when I think about the vibe with code, I feel very differently. I've often said that code has a bad vibe to it, where I'll read something in code review and just not vibe with the way it's written. I'll look at it and be like, this doesn't seem like it's going to maintain well. I can go through line by line and say each part of why I think this is the wrong way to do it, but the vibe of this is just off. I don't feel like this is the right way to do things. And my solution when I ended up in those places would be to try a few more times. Roll a different way of solving the problem and see how you feel about that new solution after giving it a shot. But for me, vibe code wasn't, I'm vibing out, I'm not looking at the code. When I think of vibe coding, I'm thinking about vibe of the code, not coding without looking at the code. And I'm sad the term has been appropriated to mean that thing. And I know it absolutely does. Vibe coding will never again mean the vibe of the code. It'll mean avoiding the code as you vibe out. But it's sad because some of what I use these tools for is to roll 3 or 4 different solutions to a problem and see which solution I vibe with more. I think that actually has a lot of potential for scale. And it's one of the coolest things about AI. Previously, if I had a 500 line of code file or 3 complex pieces building one specific feature, and it was getting harder and harder to maintain, I would put a lot of time trying to patch that feature to make it work and to fix the edge case and move on. Now it's easier than ever to just blow that part out and re-roll it from scratch, getting something that looks identical to the user, but is simpler, that I have a better vibe about. And to me, that's what's exciting about these tools is at any different scale, you can benefit from just deleting some shit and trying again. Previously, the cost of deleting a handful of files that 20 people built over 10 years was not viable. It was just too expensive to do those types of things. Now I can roll out 3 alternatives in a few minutes and look through them and see how I feel about this afterwards.
26 commits to a game where we literally vibe coded our whole way through, only letting Devin program. And when we had a expert game developer like review the code, it was kind of a wild experience because it had all these ideas that were all like mirrors of what game development could be, but they weren't actually like proper in any sort of way. They were like oddly, you would sort on the z-axis, but then you actually would never even use the z-axis sorting because it was it wasn't used. But that is something you would normally do because again.
One more important, interesting point in games. I have a whole video I have planned to do in the future of, I call it In Defense of AI Games, because I think there is some genuinely cool stuff in that space and a framing that we haven't acknowledged for how it's good. Keep an eye on the channel for that coming soon. One of the problems with AI game code is that the amount of open source code available for examples of doing good games is very low. The number of good games versus good apps is already relatively low. The number of good open source examples is like 100 to 1,000x difference. There are like 2 or 3 okay open source games. And of the like tools we use for game dev, basically none of those are open source. In the application dev world, there is an insane amount of open source examples showing us how to do things correctly. The gap in the amount of good open source training data and the ratio of good data to bad allows for AI tools to be really good at the things that there's a lot of data for, and that the data is high quality for, and not as good at the other things. If someone was to go to all these big gaming companies and buy their source code and train a model on that, it might come out a lot better. But right now, the data that we have to train AI on game stuff is relatively low. We mostly just have demos people made in 3JS. We don't have a whole lot of like real games or even the tools that real games are built with. So I don't think games are the best example of how powerful AI can be while architecting applications, simply because it doesn't have the right data. I like this quote from Zach. Game dev is very vibe-based, and I mean it in the literal opposite way of how they're saying it here. Good games are N of 1. Like, there's just so few of them. Yeah, totally agree. Another point from Dan Vale here, who's very experienced game dev. The other problem is the nature of games' cross-platform compatibility means that we don't even get to use things like the C++ built-in hash map, and AI doesn't understand that and wants me to use standard string, even though that doesn't work for many of the things we do. That makes a ton of sense. There's just so little good data for models to understand the game world that I would be surprised if any of them can consistently generate good code. I would be absolutely blown away if any of them could figure out Unreal Engine. There just isn't good examples there. Godot is an open source engine. It's an open source engine with very few games that are good using it. And of the great games built in Godot, which there are a handful now, I'm really pumped to see the success of the engine. None of them are open source. There just aren't good examples of using Godot to build things that are open source as a reference point. There are a lot of web frameworks that are open source too, like Svelte. Try to build a Svelte app with AI, I dare you. The lack of good examples of writing things with Svelte is the problem, not the tech itself. The fact that the tech itself also is closed source in a lot of the game dev cases makes it even worse, but there's just so little tooling that it's tough. Oh shit, Prime. Good to see you, man. So far, we've agreed on almost every point. So this is going to be an interesting one. I was told we weren't going to agree on this one, and so far that has not been my experience. We're like point for point, fully in agreement. Thanks for stopping by. Good to see you. Let's get back to it.
Remember, statistical models, typically you do sort by z-axis and then do some things. Well, but it turns out that like maybe that will just show up because that's just what happened, because statistically it should happen, and boom.
Prime, you absolutely do have reasonable takes on AI. People keep like misquoting them to me like you're some crazy doomer on it, but you're absolutely not. The big thing that I totally agree with you on is you're not missing out if you're not using these things yet. Like you're not at all. If you show up years late, who cares? I showed up 2.5 years late to building an AI chat app and it's still exploding and making us a ton of money. I showed up 5 years late to React and it hasn't hurt me at all. Being late's often great because you get to skip all the crap that happens on the way there. So yeah, we're almost fully aligned on all of this. I'm curious to see where we differ, but yeah.
It's happening in your code base. Why? I don't know.
We essentially asked them a bunch of questions. We asked them what tools are you using, how has your workflows changed, and sort of generally where do you think the future of software engineering is going, and how will the role of software engineer change as we get into a world of vibe coding. And we got like some pretty interesting responses. Anyone have any favorite quotes that jumped out from the founders?
I think one of them that I can read verbatim is, I think the role of software engineer will transition to product engineer. Human taste is now more important than ever as code-gen tools make everyone a 10x engineer.
I'm going to drop my take before Prime's biases me. I half agree. Taste doesn't just matter in the good taste sense. It matters more so in the bad one, where if I see the AI recommending we combine these three things together, I have enough taste and experience to be like, yeah, that doesn't sit right. I'm not sure about this one. I'm going to try again, or I'm going to take the wheel and take over from here. That matters now more than ever. Being able to catch the AI as it's going down the wrong path and steer it the right way, or just take over and do it yourself, that matters a ton. Or even more importantly, when you're starting to run into weird edge cases where things are causing bugs that don't make any sense, having the right skills to identify where the cause might be when you're even less familiar with the code than you would have been before, that matters a lot. The crazy thing that can happen with these tools is previously, to have a code base with thousands of files and hundreds of thousands of lines of code, you would need dozens of engineers. So somebody would have to know for each file how it works. But if that person's on vacation and you're on call and something is broken in a part of the code base that you have never touched before, none of that matters. You got to figure that out yourself. What's crazy is now we have individual devs or small teams of 2 to 3 people who are in the same situation because they vibe coded their way to a monolith that normally would take a lot of engineers. And when things are starting to fall apart at the seams, which it will more aggressively than with the devs, simply because the system isn't as aware of itself as the humans who would have built it prior, these skills are now more important than ever. Like, can you dive into a code base you've never seen before, get shown a bug in the production version, and figure out how to fix it without knowing the code yet? That's an incredible skill. And I would kind of bucket that with taste, but it's a different thing. Enough of me. Let's see how Prime feels.
Does code gen make you a 10x engineer? I mean, I get what he's trying to say is that you're more, I mean, that's ultimately what all programming comes down to, is your ability to change something into what you actually like, right? Creating a game. I mean, ultimately creating a game is a bunch of difficult stuff so that you can create a platform in which is your vision to execute. Now, it's the 10x part that I'm just not buying. But I do understand this idea that it's like, I want to be concerned with why I like or dislike something. And if code gen's fast enough, then you don't technically ever write code again, right? Like, I think that's the whole argument they're making. I would argue that startup founders are probably the worst people to ask for this. my general take on why they're the worst people to ask is because startup founders fundamentally program in a different type than, say, people who are maintaining a product or adding features to a long-living product, because founders are programming to get an idea out as fast as possible. And you take concessions on the technologies you use, the languages you choose, the services that you use. You take concessions everywhere at the rate of trying to just get something out. And so I can imagine that maybe an overarching architecture may not be top priority, and it's okay to vibe yourself into certain things. And I do think that you could argue that vibe coding can work if you slice it into small, like 1,000 or less lines of code sections, right? There could exist a world where you try to set up the architecture and then vibe code the small bits, because, again, the smaller you make the prediction, the more likely the LLM's able to get it correct.
So I'm going to give a weird perspective on this one, because I entirely agree, but I think there's a layer here that's really, really promising that I had a really good experience with when I was at Twitch. And this was well before we had these AI tools and vibe code as a concept. A thing I would run into a lot is we had a feature that was inherently complex, and we built this crazy system around it so it could be expanded and we could add all these other things in the future. And then 3 years pass, and we don't add any of them. Then another year passes, and we remove 2 or 3 of them. And now time has passed, and of the 10 to 50,000 lines of code for this feature, only 20,000 at most are being hit, and most of them are more complex than they needed to be because they were built with assumptions that ended up not being true. There's no good term for the second time you write something you do better, because the second system problem is its own negative connotation. But there's a positive thing where if you write the same thing twice, it'll be much better the second time always. And that retrospect is super valuable. What's cool to me about these AI tools that I've benefited from a lot is if I have one of those monolithic disasters in my code base that was built for something different than we ended up actually doing, previously I would have to maintain that for a while. And the bar I'd have to hit for frustration before I throw it away would have to be really high. And I have to get a bunch of buy-in from my company and my team in order to get permission to go throw that away and rebuild it. And I did that all the time. I was the sledgehammer guy. When there was a thing falling apart that needed to be redone, I was who would be called to come in, destroy it, and rebuild it. And that was a very vibe-based thing. I can vividly remember sitting back on my couch, blaring music, smoking weed, coding away at this feature that I just deleted like 50 plus files for to see how simply I could recreate it. And I shit you not, I had times where I threw away 30,000 lines of code and replaced them with like 500. Totally fine. Trivial even to do. And that's a skill of its own, being able to recognize, oh, there's a clean cut point here where I can throw away everything below this line, rebuild it, and have something that actually solves our problem that's significantly simpler and easier to maintain. That is more accessible than it's ever been, and that's something I'm really excited about. With T3 Chat, I rewrote the entire data layer 3 times in under a month. I changed databases twice in a week. That was never viable before. Writing a complete data architecture in a day was stupid. And does that mean we had more bugs than if I had handwritten it over 2 weeks? Sure. But it also means that my first 2 plans for how to do this got thrown away much faster because I got to see how they failed much earlier. That's awesome. I got to prototype 3 different architectures for one small section of a giant code base, and I got to throw each one away as I hit the wall on it. And that was great. Doing that before would have been miserable. Great quote from Prime. Why solve a problem with 500 lines of code when 30,000 will do? I quit my first startup over this because there was a giant backend code base that was using Redux Saga for syncing WebSockets on the server. The performance was so bad that one node could have about 5 users in it, so we just had 20 dedicated servers spun up when our average user count was 5. We had 4x the servers that we had users at this startup, and I was going insane. None of this was necessary. I felt like I was going mad. I rewrote that entire backend in 300 lines of code and had more features, better compatibility, and full drop-in replacement for all the other web platforms as well as the mobile platform, to which the response was, we can't ship this. It's not unit tested. You don't know what you're doing, Theo. You haven't tested this code. So my last PR was a 200-line addition where I hit 100% code coverage on that rewrite, and I submitted that along with my 2-week notice. I've been there. And the cool thing about these tools is, and it's crazy, but I knowing the founder of that particular startup, I won't name and shame them. If I had told him that I rebuilt the backend with AI and now it's 100x more efficient, he would have been all for it. But the fact that I wrote it and I was the front end guy meant he looked down on that work. But the big boss who blocked me from doing that would have been more cool with it if he felt like he was getting into the AI hype by accepting that code change. But that's like, it's stupid. But the people who kept me from rewriting the 30,000 lines of code into the correct 500 lines, they're more likely to say yes if I tell them I used AI to do it. It's stupid. It makes no sense. These people are morons. But I don't care. I can vibe out now in a way I couldn't before, and I can get away with murder, and it's faster. It's so good. This is why I like this stuff. The fact that more people can see this path in the code base sucks, I'm going to rewrite it. That scales to any size. But with startups, everything sucks, so you're more likely to just throw it all away anyways. The difference here is that a startup might throw away their entire code base with a new AI-generated one. A big company will throw away a very small portion, less than 1% of their code, but it's still more code than the entire startup. So I just want to acknowledge the difference there, where if you can slice out parts, as Prime said, rewriting a chunk has never been better. And with awesome tools and solutions like React, making it way easier than ever to properly compartmentalize a giant front-end code base or even a mobile code base, being able to say, okay, from this component down, we're rewriting, you can do awesome things. I love that we're 6 minutes in, he's 1 minute in, and we're like 20. This is going to be great.
I don't want to be writing unit tests for the rest of my life. Like, do imagine there is a world in which you have to write the test and the spec, and then you just try to prompt yourself into it working. Yikes.
That one. Abi from Astra said, I don't write code much. I just think and review. This is
1 sec, phone call. Hi, stream. Yeah, my sister just called to say hi and show me her cat's new toys. So, yeah. All right, have fun. Will do. Bye. Love you guys too. Talk soon. This video is already going to be 2 hours. Who cares? You can leave that in face.
Why, dude, does any engineer actually think that's a good thing? Is anybody like, you know what I want? I want to review more code.
Kind of. This is actually one of the biggest concerns I have with AI stuff. People who don't like reviewing code are screwed. I have reviewed way more code than I've written in my life, and that makes me pretty unique as an engineer. I'm not a fan of code review, to be clear. Nobody actually likes reviewing code, but I understand how important it is, and I understand how much better it makes me and the developers around me. It helps everybody level up together. If I have 2 devs with different levels of experience, let's say the size of the bubble is how experienced they are. We have dev 1, they're this experienced, and we have dev 2. Dev 2 is less experienced. If dev 1 is reviewing dev 2's code, they can help expand their circle to make it bigger. But you think, well, dev 2 is less experienced than dev 1, so that only goes one way, right? It can only help everyone get to the same amount of experience as the most experienced person. No, because there's actually a Venn diagram. And while there will probably be a lot of overlap between the circles, there's a gap between them too. There's areas that dev 2 knows about that 1 doesn't, and a lot more the other way. So if you have 2 devs, even with widely different levels of experience, collaborating and reviewing each other's code, both circles get bigger. And that's awesome. Code review's ability to distill knowledge across a team and help everybody level each other up, and making the bar for engineering knowledge on the team as high as the sum of everyone's unique knowledge, it's so cool. And the ability to watch a team grow like that is awesome. And it's why I push so hard for code review stuff. Like, I have pushed for rules at companies like you start and end every day with code review. And I've pushed against rules like code review is only the problem of on-call. Absolute disaster. I've pushed for people to ask more questions during code review. I've went as far as to say that if a PR has more than 20 lines of code, you need to leave at least 1 comment or it doesn't count as an approval. The cycle of letting people collaborate on such an important element, which is the code that we're shipping to production, is so valuable for leveling up our knowledge as engineers. And it is still also a grind. I won't pretend otherwise. But at the same time, I kind of blame GitHub for being the worst code review tool ever fucking made in the history of software, for making us hate it so much. I legitimately think we would hate it at least like 20% less if we had a better website for doing the code review. By the way, I just found this and I figured here's a good place for it. Shout out to the new, it's not even that new, the GitHub pull requests extension. Now I can click a PR here and see what the changes are, all within VS Code, and even leave comments. I can leave a comment on this and it appears on GitHub. It's so much better than doing this through the god-awful GitHub UI. Also, check out Graphite if you haven't. It's way better too. But Somebody else said one of my favorite things, so I don't have to be the one getting flamed for it. The GitHub mobile app is better for code review than the website. Yes, by a lot, which is hilarious. That extension is just the GitHub pull request extension. If you just search GitHub pull request, you'll probably find it pretty quick. Anyways.
No, like I don't know an engineer that wants that.
I just think and review. This is like a super technical.
I'm an investor in Mastra.
Think and review.
1 sec to confirm. I'm scared how many of the companies I'm invested in are about to be roasted. Okay, I'm not. Cool. It's the other M company is the one I'm invested in this batch. Not invested in Mastra. Phew. Cool.
This is like a super technical founder whose like last company was also a DevTools company. He's like extremely able to code, and so it's fascinating to have people like that saying things like this.
There's another quote from a different RB from Copycat, who said I am far less attached.
Okay, I am talking to Mastra, and I might end up investing. So, anyways,
attached to my code now, so my decisions on whether we decide to scrap or refactor code are less biased. Since I can code 3 times as fast, it's easy for me to scrap and rewrite if I need to.
Yep, this is the point I was just trying to make. I fully agree with this. The willingness to throw away code has been awesome, and I think that despite AI code not always being great, the overall quality and experience working in the code bases that I build nowadays is better because when things do suck, I'm less scared to throw them away.
Since I can code 3 times as fast, it's easy for me to scrap and rewrite if I need to.
And then I guess the really cool thing about this stuff is it actually parallelizes really well. So Yoav from K60, he says, I write everything.
No, it does not. Doing multiple AI code things at once in parallel is fucking awful. And anyone who says this has not worked on complex enough things, trying to run 2 agents at once in your code base at the same time, horrible. Horrible.
With cursor. Sometimes I even have 2 windows of cursor open in parallel, and I prompt them on 2 different features.
I'm just trying to get work trees working in cursor properly. There's no way in hell you're working on 2 different features at the same time. Ugh.
Which makes sense. Why not 3? You know, you
Exactly.
could do a lot, actually.
And I think another one that's great is from
Interesting. Sounds like a merge. I mean, of course, but I mean that's just 2 workers working, right? Merge conflicts are natural. I'm not too worried about that. The one part where he said if I don't like a piece of code, I can just throw it away and refactor it and just redo it again. I don't get nearly as attached to code. First off, that's like a mentality choice. You can always fix you being attached to code. It doesn't really.
Okay, actually, I was going to jump in there. I'm going to let him finish his thought first because this is one of the first parts I don't fully agree with.
Have anything to do with the speed. I mean, if you want to get faster, learn your language, type faster. Honestly, you can get through so much code when you know what you're doing. But then on top of that, I think that's probably irrelevant. I will say that the faster code changes, the more likely you are to reintroduce bugs or introduce new bugs that are subtle and very difficult. And that is kind of there's definitely like a challenge to that.
Yeah, okay, this is where I'm jumping in because I don't fully agree. I'm going to present a fun exercise for you guys. I want you all to imagine a person that you've worked with in the past or know of. Imagine a perfectly average dev, the most average dev you've ever worked with. Somebody who doesn't hang out in chats like this. Somebody who's annoyed that server components exist because they don't want React to change from the way they learned it 5 years ago. Somebody who's kind of burnt out, just doing it for the money, but is fine at the work. They sometimes give good comments in code review. They sometimes put up PRs that are fine. Sometimes they're garbage. Who cares? Everyone has good days and bad days. Just imagine like the perfect average, as average as they can be, average developer. Do you have this person in your head? Ideally, a human that you know, not yourself. If you're here, you're almost certainly above average. I want you to imagine a perfectly average dev, the kind of person that you're not upset that you hired, but you're not that excited you did either. Like if they were to disappear tomorrow, it'd be like, yeah. Do you have that person in your head now? Half of developers are dumber than that person. That's how averages work. If you have a person who is right in the middle, half of devs are dumber than them. This is an important thing to understand as you make decisions about tools and technologies, generally speaking. The average developer and the devs below that average, the majority of devs, are not that great at software. And if I've seen anything from working with these devs over the years, they get really attached to the work they did that actually got through because they have to work harder to get the thumbs up on that PR and to get that code merged into the code base. As such, their willingness to throw things away is generally much lower. And the skill Prime just talked about that you can learn, which is the willingness to throw away code when it's no longer solving the problems that you care about, that is a skill you can learn, but it's a skill that puts you in a very high tier of engineer. The majority of engineers don't like their code being thrown away. And this was a very hard lesson I had to learn early in my career because I was the sledgehammer guy. I was the one who would come in, throw away the giant pile of garbage and replace it with 300 lines of more maintainable code. And I'm sure I would introduce bugs here and there with it. I know for a fact I did. But for every bug I introduced, I had squashed 3, as well as a 4th edge case nobody had even bothered documenting. This happened all the time. I can't tell you how annoyed my product manager and I can't tell you how annoyed my PM would get because there would be 50 issues in Jira that just are being left stale. And we go through them a year later and I'm like, oh, yeah, I killed half of these with these 2 random changes. And I couldn't even find the PR to link to so that she could mark it proper when she closed it. The systems aren't built for that mindset. They're not built for people to come in and rewrite something because most people are arbitrarily attached to their bullshit. I didn't mix up mean and median. I know what I was saying. I'm not telling people to theorize a median programmer because the average programmer and the median programmer are going to be very similar. Shut the fuck up. If you actually think that matters, you're probably on the wrong side of that median. Anyways, this is actually a really good point, K. Martinez. There is a difference between skill and mentality. 100% agree. The point I'm trying to make is that one of the biggest blockers for improving your skill is your mentality. And I know a lot of skilled developers that have the wrong mentality, but I don't know any bad developers with the right mentality. That I almost never see. If you have the right mentality, your skill is just a work in progress and you'll get there pretty fast. The mentality of being willing to throw away code will make you skill up so much faster that I can't imagine somebody with that mentality not being pretty skilled. And sadly, most developers are not that skilled. The really magical thing that happened here is that those less skilled developers are already having their mentality shifted. And the reason that mentality shifting is they can now kind of have that feeling of being the Vim god. For a lot of these devs, AI is the first time they could write hundreds of lines of code to solve a complex problem and have it work first try. These are devs that would have had to spend weeks on those things in the past. And I agree, someone like Prime or myself can do it in a day, maybe even a few hours. The AI lets people who couldn't before do that. And that's allowed for a less capable developer, a developer who has a worse mindset, to more easily accept this. And many of them are the ones who are dreading this the most. The people who are so scared of AI are the same people who are scared to delete their code because they put a lot of work in. It is terrifying to lose this thing that they had put all this effort into. AI is forcing those people to get over it faster and also making it a little easier for them to do the same. So I think that's the one piece I would add to what Prime is saying here is there are a lot of devs who have struggled to develop that specific skill of being willing to throw away code. AI has made it easier for them to digest and easier for them to do in the first place because now they can generate code faster. They're less likely to be attached to that code. And that's a good thing. Being really attached to the specific implementation of a problem that you wrote is bad and will hold you back as an engineer and will hold back the quality of the code base and the team that you're on. That is a much less likely thing with these new tools.
I don't like the idea of using somebody's ability to sell a company as a means for if they're a person you should listen to. Like I do think maybe they have there's the get lucky aspect. There's the actually smart person. There is somebody who saw what they did and kind of snake oiled their way in and they got lucky by somebody else trying to effectively just sell and get out as fast as possible, right? There's many different reasons why something is successful.
I am fighting so hard to go down the craziest tangent that will make this video 4 hours long. You guys have no idea. I'll go a step further than he did here, actually. Successfully getting into Y Combinator and getting through it and coming out on top doesn't prove much of anything. You get into YC for any of many different things, but it all comes down to one key point. You impressed a group partner more than all of the other companies they're talking to. If you impressed a group partner enough, you're in. And if you didn't, you're not. So the only real thing we know by your success getting into Y Combinator is that one of the group partners liked you. That's it. That's the only thing you have proven by getting into YC. You've not proven that you're a great engineer. You certainly haven't proven that you have a good idea. In fact, it might be the opposite. I'd say 3/4 of YC companies pivot, and of the successful ones, 9 out of 10 do. And you certainly, and we don't even have proof that you know how to sell your company or raise money yet. That I've seen a lot of startup founders struggle to figure out as they're going. So getting into YC and being a Y Combinator company does not mean anything other than that you impressed a specific human. And a lot of the time I'm impressed with somebody, I'm wrong. I know that's the case with the YC partners too. A company getting into YC doesn't mean that they're superstars or they're really talented or they're going to succeed. It does mean they impressed one person. And impressing one person can happen for a lot of reasons, and not all of them are the person was good. So consider that here. The other side, the tangent I'm not going to do, but I'll give you a hint of it so you guys can tell me if you want this one in the future. It's a defense of a handful of these people. I'm sure you all know Levels.io. Levels is the creator of a ton of different small to medium-sized projects that make quite a bit of revenue, including his new flying vibe-coded game that is making way more money than it probably should be. His ability to make money on these things does not prove that he is a skilled developer. And on top of that, it doesn't mean that we should listen to his advice with software. I think we should all listen to Levels more, though, because the things he cares about are things we all can learn from. When he is solving problems and he is building software, the thing he cares about most is the ability to make changes quickly and address problems as soon as they come up. He has built a stack that would make most of us cower in fear so that he can, in 2 clicks in his editor, not even clicks, key prompts. Like when he does Command S, it doesn't save because he saves on every key press. It commits. And when he does Command Enter, it auto deploys it straight up to a VPS. We shouldn't copy his workflow, but we should learn from his way of thinking about these things and see the real meaningful benefits of shipping faster. It makes it easier for him to address customer concerns. It makes it easier for people to get hyped on what he's building because it's so much faster moving, and the back and forth and the relationship he has with his users is fundamentally different as a result. It means he can sell better and turn things around faster too. And most importantly, it means he could build something that doesn't work and throw it away way faster. In a lot of ways, Levels was the first vibe coder because he was so willing to write 15 projects and throw them all away because the 16th did better than he expected. And there's a lot we can learn from that. It isn't the technical details of how he builds, it's the philosophy that he uses when he makes these decisions. So when someone is as successful as Levels, you can't trust anything they say still. But in the case of Levels, there is actually a lot we can learn. And that's why I'm so defensive of him in the way that he does things. And I'm not saying that because we should all be using Command Enter to auto deploy via FTP to a PHP server. I'm saying it because the way he thinks is interesting and should challenge us all to ship better and faster. But yeah, almost entirely agree with Prime. I would go further. Someone being in YC saying something means absolutely nothing.
And it could be that the person's actually really wise, was able to have a lot of foresight and able to solve the right problems for the right time. It's just, it's an interesting reason to use as a means for good or bad. Like, oh, we listen to this person because they've sold a company. It's like, is that a good reason?
Which makes sense.
Yep, I totally agree. If you're listening to somebody, it should be because the things they're saying vibe with your understanding of it, or because the person solved a specific problem in the area that you're trying to do.
Why not 3? You know, you
Exactly.
can do a lot, actually.
And I think another one that's great is from the founder of Train Loop. He mentions how coding has changed 6 to 1 month ago. 10x speed up 1 month ago to now is 100x speed up, exponential acceleration.
I'm in pain. This one hurts me.
100x speed up? Really? That can't be real. Like, how slow were they before? That's dude, that's like an insane statement to say you're 100x faster. I get some people that are just so, like, I've watched people who don't know how to code attempt to code, and like watching them formulate an if statement is like probably akin to ripping off my toenails.
If you've never watched somebody have to do 3 Google searches to write like an if statement, you don't know true pain. The reason I put us through that exercise earlier of like, imagine the average engineer, half of them are dumber. It's this. We're all in a bubble. Everyone hanging out here, most people watching this video, the vast majority of us are in a bubble. Some of us work in a place where we're the best engineer and the people around us are so dumb that we feel miserable constantly. I know I've been there, and I'm sure a handful of you have too. But generally speaking, the people hanging out in this chat and the people who are in the comment section right now, for the most part, are not the types of people that we're talking about here. These people are actually probably experiencing 100x speed up, but they're probably now able to ship bugs 100 times faster too. At the same time, there's another thing happening here that is actually kind of good. When somebody like Prime or me is on a team with someone that stupid, it quickly gets hard for us to help them grow. It's just so frustrating watching them work that we start avoiding it at all costs. We're more likely to just do the quick feature ad than let them near the ticket. They don't get the same growth opportunities because they're awful and nobody wants to work with them. The AI doesn't care though. And I would be surprised if we don't see more of these like 0.1x devs skill up to like a 0.5x dev. And I think one of the cool things about this tech is that people who otherwise would not have had coworkers help them because they're just straight up too dumb and bad at this, now get a much tighter feedback loop that allows them to improve more effectively. That has actual potential. I would bet that if you took one of these people, if you took somebody who feels like they're 100 times faster with AI, if you took their AI away, they're still going to be 10x faster than they were pre-AI because now they can read more code, get more feedback, and skill up faster. I would hope. I am sure that there are plenty of people who are using this to close their eyes, not open them. But the ones who now are looking at more code, getting more feedback, and improving as a result, there are some devs that are going to go from entirely incompetent to almost competent just because they're doing it more. Because if you're that dumb that you have to do 3 Google searches per if statement, you're not writing a lot of code because it sucks to do. You just feel bad doing it. These tools make you feel less bad. You're more likely to get over the hump and do better. It's the same thing when I teach beginners how to code. I try to get them to a point where they have code that results in something they can use as quickly as possible. That's why I use React and Vue or React and Next.js when you're starting, because you can so quickly get something where you have code in one view and you have the web page on another tab, and you can switch between the two and see your code changing the site. That feeling gets you going faster. That reward makes you more involved and invested. AI helps more people have that, more points throughout their dev cycles. They could actually get smarter here. Not a lot smarter, and not all the time. For every one person who does this, there's going to be 5 who get dumber because of it. But I would be excited to see the devs who do actually level up because the reps they're getting in are much more aggressive. They're doing it more often. I like this, actually. It's kind of related to fake it until you make it. Absolutely. You can now fake it much more aggressively, and just by being in the seat, seeing the code being written, seeing what does and doesn't work, you're getting the reps in. You're doing more of it. And that's a good thing.
Like it's very, very, very painful. And so I can imagine that something like Copilot is actually like, it actually feels 10x slower or 10x faster because like you're no longer just like, like, right? Like you're fast. You know, it's like,
I thought I was being too harsh on these devs. I feel way less bad now. Thank you, Prime.
can understand that.
And he says, I'm no longer an engineer. I'm a product person."
100x?
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think like that might be something that's happening broadly. You know, it really ends up being 2 different roles. It actually maps to how engineers sort of self-assign today, in that either you're, front end or back end, and then back end ends up being about actually infrastructure. And then front end is so much more actually being a PM. You're sort of almost being like an ethnographer going into the obscure.
I don't know what an ethnographer I don't know what that means.
Your underserved parts of the
Maybe an AI wrote the script. I've never heard that word either.
pie of GDP,
Ethnographer.
and you're trying to extract out like this is what those people in that GDP pie actually want, and then I'm gonna turn that into code, and then actually evals are the most important part of that.
When I was running TripleByte, this was actually one of the things we noticed. It was almost as important as a technical assessment of engineers when trying to figure out who's a good match for a specific company. There's a certain threshold of technical ability you need, but beyond that, it was, do you actually want to talk to users or not? Like some engineers are actually just a lot more motivated by working on things where they know who the users are and they get to like communicate with them and they get live feedback and they can iterate, and essentially being a product engineer. And other engineers really don't want to do that at all. Like they find it annoying having to deal with users, and they want to just like work on like hard technical problems and refactor
That's a
code.
back-end engineer.
Yeah, that's what we call it.
So, I mean, it's also like there's also tools engineers. There's more than just front end and back end. It's a very web-centric way to look at the world. But there is more than just that, right? And so one of the big things, I think what they're saying is that, like, I personally am not a huge fan of just working with customers. I rather would be the customer, and I build a product for something that solves the problems that I'm trying to have.
Bangers on bangers. If you have a company with however many people solving a problem that they don't have, or one obsessed dumbass that cares a lot about that problem and has it every day, that one obsessed dumbass is going to win every time. I know, because I'm that obsessed dumbass. When I have a problem and I'm frustrated with the solutions that exist, I will run laps around 1,000+ person company because they are so lost because they don't understand the problem. I even had Twitch cloning the features I was building for Ping because I understood what Twitch creators needed more than the Twitch staff did. And when I built the wrong thing, they blindly followed me there too, which was even funnier. So totally agree here. Ideally, you are the customer. And if you're not, you better be spending a hell of a lot of time working with them and empathizing with them. The part I disagree with is the idea of like, there are these different types of engineers and some of them don't need to talk to their users. No. If you're a tooling engineer, you still have users, but those users are developers. You might not think of it as talking to your users when you have lunch with them and they complain about this thing that your tool didn't do for them, but you are. Being able to talk to those users and understand what they want and need and what could possibly benefit them is an essential skill for anyone building solutions to problems. And sadly, it's a skill that has been somewhat rare in the software dev world for a while. One of the things that's both exciting and terrifying about these AI tools is if I have a problem and I'm motivated enough to solve it, I can push through learning enough code to make the thing work. And I've seen people who are so frustrated with the state of one specific thing they use every day that they learn code enough to solve it. This is a weird example tangent, but we're already here. We're going to ride it. I was in LA for something. I was trying to fly back to SF. My flight kept getting delayed, and I was just standing waiting, and I was standing next to a pilot who was trying to jump the flight in order to get to a different flight he had to take from SF. I just chatted with him a whole bunch and was talking about software for flight stuff. What had happened was I got a notification on my app Flighty that the flight had been delayed again. I mentioned it to him. 3 minutes later, the flight attendants confirmed it at the desk. And he's like, how did you know that so early? I showed him the app. He's like, oh, that's really cool. I love when people build good apps for flight stuff. And then told me this wild story. One of his old coworkers, another pilot that he used to work with, was so frustrated about the state of the bidding system for them to pick which flights they wanted to have, because there was this crappy dashboard that would go out. Actually, it wasn't even a dashboard. I think it was an Excel spreadsheet they would send out to all the pilots. They'd have to go in the spreadsheet, mark the things they want, and send them back and hope that someone would dedupe it and they would get the flights they want. And it never worked. He was so annoyed about this that he built his own web app, having never coded before. He taught himself to code to build a web app to better track which flights were available and which flights different pilots were taking. That ended up doing so well that he quit to do it full time, ended up selling it for some number of millions of dollars, was really well off, missed flying so much he went back to it. So he's still a pilot. That's the thing he loves is flying. He solved a problem he had. It went way better than expected. He sold the solution, and he doesn't write code anymore. He just flies. The dude did not want to be a developer, but the fact that he cared this much meant that he could run circles around anyone else because he would learn the thing he had to because he was so pissed off. You don't want to be on the other side of that person. It doesn't matter how skilled you are. You will not beat them. You do not care as much. They will win. The same advice I give to companies that are like, how do we make our own YouTube channel? If you're not as obsessed with YouTube as I am, if you're not watching hours of a day of this shit, which I shouldn't be doing, but I can't help myself. I just love this platform. You're not going to beat us if you're not obsessed. It doesn't matter how much money you spend or how many people you hire. You will not beat an obsessed dumbass because they don't know what they're doing is wrong. They're going to keep pushing until it suddenly is right. So yeah, I think that's one of the cool aspects of these tools is somebody like that pilot can get a lot further along using these AI tools. And now they'll have that feeling of, oh, I might actually be able to do this. The earlier you can get that feeling into someone's head, the more likely they are to push through the hard parts and make it happen. I think of all of this in terms of skateboarding. Somebody who gets close to an ollie in their first 3 or 4 attempts is much more likely to go all the way with skateboarding than someone who takes hundreds of tries. But the person who took 100 tries to do it, if they still keep going and they don't stop, if they take thousands of tries to land their first ollie, that fucker's going to be unstoppable. Don't get in their way. Doesn't Twitch have user research though? The problem with user research is the people that you want to get info from, which are the top creators, they don't respond to user research requests. And if you're doing user research, the people who get that email from Twitch and they're like, yeah, I'll dedicate an hour to telling Twitch what's wrong, they go in and complain about how hard it is to be a small creator. And if you listen to those people, you're going to ruin the fucking platform. I know that because they ruined the fucking platform. So no, there is no user research that works at a company that has that level of tiering between its users. You can't interview the users that matter. You have to understand the users that matter. You have to be friends with them. You have to be the person they call when something goes wrong. There's no world in which Twitch's user research could ever have solved these problems. It just doesn't work that way. Even with moderation, we had a PM that was so deep that they were the moderator for a bunch of giant channels because they were doing the moderation work every day. I'm sure there were formal user research things here and there. But what they ended up doing is he hit up his friends and they put a demo in front of them to show them and say, hey, how do you feel about this idea we have to solve these moderation problems? And they could give us feedback as we were working on it because they were friends with the PM running the project. That works. generic user research teams that don't even watch Twitch themselves, they don't know the difference between an XQC and somebody with 14 letters in their name that gets 5 viewers. They are like, oh, I have 2 pieces of feedback. These are both equal. They have no idea what they're talking about. User research teams will destroy Twitch.
Building tools that can solve other programmers' problems is something that I largely enjoy, just because it is my own problem as well. So I understand it at a very intense level. There are other places that do exist, right? I mean, the ML that they're talking about also is filled with ML engineers that are neither front end or back end.
Back-end engineer, yeah, sure. And that's only a theme that came up in these survey responses, right? This idea of sort of the LLMs are maybe going to push people to choose because the actual writing of the code may become less important. And it's about, do you have taste and you want to solve product problems, or are you an architect and you want to solve systems problems?
Oh,
Did he just claim that back-end engineers have no taste? Perfect face. I paused it on literally the perfect face.
I'm a back-end engineer. I have at least a little bit of taste. I will defend this some amount. If you're a back-end engineer that's refused to learn any modern web tools, technologies, and solutions, the likelihood that you have taste or user empathy is relatively low. To compare that to somebody like Prime, Prime deeply understands React. He has frustrations with it that I'm not fully aligned with. Our conclusions on React are different, but he tried it. He built things with it. He understands so much about React. He is not the person that they're talking about when they say a back-end engineer. The same way I'm not. There's a spectrum here. But there are absolutely people who staunchly sit in the back end and get really mad that web is improving at any point. So, yeah. I can see why Prime would think they're talking about him, because I even felt like they were talking about me a bit, because I still kind of identify as a back-end engineer. Most of my time's on back-end, not front-end. So, I get it. But I also genuinely feel that back-end engineers who have avoided front-end at all costs, they don't have taste or user empathy yet. I know because I was one of those. It took me until 2019 to take front-end seriously, and it fundamentally changed how I think about product. And it's made me a much better person, fundamentally. Not just like a better engineer, but I'm a more empathetic human that can better understand the needs of other people because I've talked to more people and I've seen how they use the things that I built. So, yeah. Prime is right in being annoyed because he feels like they're talking about him, and it sounds like they're talking about him, but they're not. I feel the same way. Stupid comment on their part.
The actual perfect face. Back-end engineers don't have taste? I know what he's trying to say, though, right? Which is that you prefer the aesthetics and usability as opposed to the building of the actual product. And so I think they're making kind of like an odd distinction because the front end actually needs this too. Any complicated project. I mean, I think the thing is that a lot of founding stuff isn't a complicated project. And what I mean by a complicated project is like if you built a CAD thing or some sort of like interface that's actually a user thing that does not involve the front end, meaning that it's not just another React app, you actually have to have logic sitting off to the side. You have like to have a whole state world that is created and then a smaller front end. Then, I mean, that person they're probably equating to as a back end engineer.
Kind of agree. It's just particularly funny to hear this right now because one of the companies in the current batch is one named Atom. It's an AI generator for CAD 3D mocks. So you can generate CAD files in seconds. And some of the best CAD people I know have been very impressed and surprised by the quality of what this is capable of already. It's a genuinely really fucking cool company. And I probably should invest in these guys. I'm 50-50 on it still because I don't know shit about CAD. But I've heard nothing but great things from people who I would have expected to be assholes about this. One of the things that YC's been bringing up more in recent videos is this idea that the best startups right now aren't the ones that you can vibe code in a week, which is weird because that's how I've actually felt for a while is ideally you can take any idea and distill some part of it down to something that takes a week to build so you can start testing it as quickly as possible. YC has been encouraging more companies to do things that can't go that fast. Something like an AI immigration law service, because that takes months, if not years, to get right. But if nobody else is making that investment and it turns out to be the right one, by putting the time in to make this really hard thing, you're more likely to succeed. And if you do, your winnings will be huge. If you win with a project that takes you a week to build, the foundation you've built for yourself isn't very sturdy. If you win with a thing that took you months to build and no one else has tried yet, they're not going to be able to catch up. The strongest wins right now are the companies that spend the whole batch building something really hard, get it out right at the end of the batch, and suddenly start blowing up. Those companies kill it.
That back-end engineer person that kind of runs this whole state world is actually on the front end doing stuff. So any like Google Sheets. Google Sheets is a marvel of technology. That right there is probably 99% back and then some amount of front.
This is the first point I've like fully disagreed with Prime on. Do not discount the unbelievable engineering work that went into the client side on Google Sheets, Google Docs, and all the other Google Office Suite products. The front-end engineering of those things is a fucking marvel. The back end is a stupid crud sync layer. I mean, it's more complex than usual because the deduping there is miserable and the multiplayer aspect is tough. The back end for Sheets is more complex than most back ends. The front end for Sheets is more complex than almost any other front end. I don't even want to think about the front end code for Sheets. That makes me like feel sick. One of the most complex things to do in the web is a high performance table. One of my favorite sponsors is AG Grid. These guys sell a grid component because doing a good one is hard. And you look at this and you're like, oh yeah, I would never want to build this and make it work with like filters and like changing sort orders all automatically with animations. No one wants to build this. And anybody who's had to hated it. But that's a purchased component. There's no way big companies are buying that, right? 90% of the Fortune 500 use AG Grid. That's how fucking hard this is. So yeah, making a complex table, as simple as it might seem, it's not 1% of the code for Google Sheets. I'm sorry, Prime. You've said one stupid thing so far, but this is the stupid thing. Google Sheets is not 1% front-end code. No.
Or maybe 80% like just they would call back-end coding despite it being on the front end, despite it being about the UI.
Okay, he just immediately recovered. The actual rendering part is still more complex than almost any other app, but the logic to handle what element is re-rendering when and the layer to go between the backend, the state, and the UI, that architecture is complex beyond fucking belief. And it's one of the reasons there isn't a Google Sheets competitor that's viable. It's so hard to do that. It's unbelievably difficult. So I don't know how I would cut these lines, but yeah, I think it's a bad example. There are lots of other much better examples to communicate what he's saying. Something like Twitter, for example. That's 1 to 5% front end, majority back end. Google Sheets is a tough example here.
Despite all of that, then 20% actually like UI work.
Oh, and interestingly, I guess one thing the survey did indicate is that this stuff is terrible at debugging.
Yeah.
And so the humans have to do the debugging still. They have to figure out, well, what is the code actually doing? Here's a bug. Where's, spot
everyone's
the bug.
favorite
Where's
thing
the
to do,
code
by the way,
path
debugging.
That, we have some, logic error, just didn't figure this out, right?
Prime is touching on a thing that I have felt really bad in non-code spaces. One of the problems I've had with AI tools is they often try to replace the fun part, not the annoying part, especially in video editing. There's all these tools that are like, I'm going to edit your videos for you. And none of them are, we're going to make it easier to collaborate with your sponsors and swap different assets out depending on what they request. Or we're going to make it easier to organize the giant pile of assets you're managing to figure out what goes in your video. No one's doing those parts because they're hard. Everybody's trying to automate the fun part because it's easy. And also, more importantly, because they don't understand it. And it drives me fucking mad. We're getting there with dev now, where more and more the dev tools that we're using every day are trying to optimize the fun parts to make it faster to ship. But things like debugging and things like code review are kind of being left behind, like the 2-channel sponsors between Graphite and CodeRabbit building better AI code review stuff. It's really nice, and I like it a lot, but it's not a replacement for those boring parts. You still got to do them. So, yeah, I wish the AI would focus more on the things that suck, not the things that are fun, but it is what it is.
There doesn't seem to be a way to just tell it debug. You were saying that you have to be very explicit, like as if giving instructions to a first-time software engineer.
I have to really spoon feed it the instructions to get it to debug stuff, or you can kind of embrace the vibes. I'd say Andrej Karpathy style is just like ignore the bug and just like re-roll, just like tell it to try again from scratch.
I can't imagine actually living that life. Somehow we've convinced ourselves to go from a context-free grammar to a context-sensitive grammar for programming. And now people are creating context-free grammars on top of the context-sensitive grammar to produce context-free grammars again. I'm not exactly sure how we got ourselves into this position, but here we are. RNG programming is kind of what, like literally, Andrej Karpathy just described Fortnite. Like,
fun fact, I covered this in the Claude video. If you go into a thread in Claude, like Claude.ai, and you edit the title of the thread and set it to empty string, the behavior is non-deterministic. There's 5 different cases you can hit, and none of them have like preset like things that will lead to them. It's effectively random which way it will break when you do that. This non-deterministic chaos we've put ourselves in here is kind of insane. The point Prime's making here is previously with code, at least properly written code, if you take a given function and you run it twice with the same input, you'll get the same output. With AI, you will not. The theoretical here is you generate code, it's close, but the result has a bug. Telling the AI to fix the bug is hard because it's not very good at debugging, identifying what's wrong and fixing it. It's easier to hit retry and see if the next time it does it, it comes out correct. And that's insane because that's never how we've written software. Generally speaking, we write software by writing a solution, and if it doesn't work, we go through to find why it didn't work and fix it, or we throw it away and rewrite it. This idea that we would rerun the same thing to try and get a different output is an entirely different way of thinking that feels antithetical to engineering. It's more nuanced than that, but I'm leaning towards Prime on this one. It is kind of weird and definitely chaotic that we're where we are now.
I'm going to drop Tilted Towers, and hopefully I get a shotgun and some guy just has a pickaxe, or maybe they have the shotgun and I just have the pickaxe. We're just gonna keep rolling until I can land Tilted Towers successfully and get through. Just RNG vibes.
Like, it's wild how your coding style changes when actually writing the code becomes 1,000x cheaper. Like, as a human, you would never just like blow away something that you'd worked on for a long time and rewrite it from scratch because you had a bug.
Yeah, he's right. He's right. He's definitely right. That's never happened. I've personally never done that. I've definitely never done that. Definitely never been convinced that someone else's code's horseshit, rewritten it just to rewrite almost identical line for line code, then realize I'm the horseshit.
Definitely never happened to me either. I certainly haven't had to rewrite the exact same data architecture 3 separate times just to come to the same conclusions each and every time, all in the course of a week. Definitely didn't recently do that for T3 chat or anything. I definitely don't have an hour-long video about all that. Never once.
Definitely have never done that.
You'd always fix the bug, but like for the LLM, if you can just like rewrite 1,000 lines of code in like 6 seconds, like
it doesn't cost anything.
Why not? You know?
That's kind of like writing, taking the approach of how people use Midjourney or Playground when you're trying to generate images. Like if there are artifacts or things that I don't like, sometimes I don't even change the prompt. I just click re-roll, and I do that 5 times, and sometimes it just works. I'm just like, oh, I can use that now.
I vibe with Gary on this one. I hate it, but it's true. My first AI pill I took was Midjourney. I was very impressed with it. Not for things I would post by themselves or use by themselves, but as a starting point I could use either to vibe out an idea I was going to spend a bunch of time in Photoshop in, or to just get specific assets I would use in a Photoshop job. And the solution with Midjourney is, on one hand, learning the esoteric art of prompting for images. It's a very strange, arcane thing I had to get a lot of help from a friend who's good at it from. Also, I've been avoiding mentioning that I'm a Midjourney bro for over a year now. I have so many DMs where I ask people to not reveal that. I'm thankful to have shed the cloak and say AI a little bit more aggressively now. It's nice that I don't feel like I have to hide that anymore. On the other hand, sometimes when I was using Midjourney, the solution was to just hit retry over and over again, and then to take the 2 you liked, put them in the reference thing, and re-roll more times in order to filter out the bullshit. And it's not pleasant. It's not a fun thing, but it does work surprisingly well, and sometimes better prompting doesn't get you where you need to be.
I gotta be right back. I have to walk away. I'm walking away.
Yeah, we have different takes on this one. I do hate the non-deterministic nature of these things. The fact that somebody can give me a prompt that broke really bad for them and then it doesn't for me drives me mad as a software dev trying to debug things. The more I think about it, the more I'm on his side. It does just suck. The one thing that was great about software is that it was somewhat deterministic, and the more that goes away, the more painful life is.
Take it a moment. All right. So I've considered life. One thing I realized that might be a bit kind of naive of me is that C.S. Lewis talks about this in the 3rd chapter of Abolition for Man, about kind of the death of magic and the birth of science. And in the birth of science, there was a pursuit of knowledge, and knowledge being the end goal. And then as science has gone on, there's the pursuit of science for the ability to effectively lord over nature or to turn into nature the quantity of an object and to be able to sell that and have power over man. That's kind of like the third chapter's big argument, or one of the few big arguments. And what I realize is that perhaps there is a generation of coders who fit into the birth of science and the death of magic style. And I think there's a group of engineers who kind of fall into this category in which they pursue programming as a means to an end. The journey is the destination, which is that I want to become better at programming. I want to become better. I want to learn more problems. I don't understand how compilers work. I want to build a compiler for the sake of building a compiler. The end product, the speed in which I can produce the compiler, is not as relevant as the production of the compiler itself. And so therefore, that's kind of the way I want. And so that's kind of what I'm also seeing with a lot of this, is that there's probably two sides to the coin. There is the desire for knowledge and then the desire for lording.
I'm so sorry. I have to comment on the fact that Twitter's streaming is so broken. He's had to edit the title 3 times and it still hasn't gone through. Everyone who says that like streaming on Twitter is the future does not understand streaming, Twitter, or the future. Like, you have to know how none of those 3 things work to think that.
Over nature, right? And so that's kind of what I'm generally hearing here. Hold on, I'm just trying to figure out how to get this thing to save. I should read Abolition of Man. Abolition of Man is really, really good.
Tactic wolf surface, just like this XKCD. Anytime an integer is stored or read, its value is adjusted upward or downward by a random amount between 40 and 50. My new language almost completely eliminates off by 1 errors. Quality. We do love some good random chaos.
Chapter 3 is like my most favorite of all time, kind of talking about the plights of man and what it kind of is costing. It's very, very interesting.
It worked.
So,
frame of building systems, because you're not building foundationally step by step. You're really doing it from scratch, because fundamentally what's going on is like all these tools today are coming from the world of generated code that are in this latent space hidden somewhere, and you have to do it from scratch to find like a different gradient and not get stuck. And then you want to like add a bit of randomness, get it to regenerate. But I do think maybe, I don't know, whatever next generation of 05, maybe we'll get to the point that actually is able to build upon. I mean, as of right now, I think most of it is you need to re-roll and rewrite, but it doesn't build upon it yet. But we haven't seen any of the coding tools right now work well with reasoning. I think we have.
Well, 03 is infinitely better at debugging than 3.5 Sonnet. So like, it definitely feels like we're headed in the direction where this may not be true in 6 months, the next time we do this.
Infinitely better? 3.5 Sonnet was like, it seems to be way, like, as far as I can tell, almost every single, evidently, I thought every single person I've talked to thus far almost universally claims that Sonnet 3.5 is still like the bee's knees until Sonnet 3.7 came out.
Here's where my AI bro stuff starts to show. I'm actually useful here. I recently posted my ranking of like the current models and how I feel about them. Claude 3.5 is way better at CSS. It is the best model for making something that looks decent for the web ever. It knows React really well. It can build components wonderfully quickly. It can scaffold an application via a screenshot of it surprisingly fast. It can't debug for shit because it has no thinking. It doesn't have the ability to check its work built in. It just generates word after word. The way all standard AI works, all the non-reasoning models work, is they very simply take all of the words that exist in the history, be it the question you asked, the previous things that have been used in the chat, and based on all of those, the next word is determined based on how likely it is, considering the words that came prior. Every token, every chunk of text is determined based on the likelihood it would be there, comparing it to the text that existed prior. The thing that this can't do is catch when it makes a mistake. So if it makes a mistake 20 tokens ago or 8 lines ago, it doesn't know how to handle that 8 lines down. What reasoning models do that are different is they put out an output or they talk through their steps, and then some tool, sometimes it's the training, sometimes it's an injected programming thing, something stops it and says, okay, what is wrong with this? Or, okay, what are the steps you'll use to solve the problem? It does these checks almost throughout. And that's why I have my stupid weight index that I coined in my Alibaba Quen QWQ video. The thing the thinking models can do is check. They can say, wait, what, well, all of these words, because once that word occurs, it's more likely the next word is a correction to whatever was wrong before. And these little hacks, so to speak, let us generate better outputs. And it makes it more likely that you can reason through something difficult, like a bug. And when I'm trying to solve a difficult problem, O3 Mini it's unbelievable how good it is. I have had such good luck putting hard, annoying problems with everything from scroll containers to weird database architecture into O3, and either got a really good answer or one that was so bad that I realized I must be thinking about the whole problem entirely wrong. So that's what O3 is good at. I've had a lot of problems like that where Claude just throws its hands up and gives me some really shitty React code. But O3 can solve those hard problems. But if you ask O3 to build you a beautiful website, it's certainly going to build you a website. I can't comment on its beauty. Yeah. The other way of putting it, there's a video called Vibe Coding. Claude's vibes are immaculate. It feels great to use. The tone it has, the code it generates, the vibe of the outputs that you get from the output of the code you render the website for, to the way it talks to you about your lost beloved friend that you're venting about. The vibes of Claude are great. The vibes of O3 are more like a scientist, more like, you guys are however many hours in this video, I'll say things I normally don't. The vibes of O3 are a very autistic person trying to make sure every word they say is correct, triple checking everything they say before they send it. It's that one weird friend who types the message, deletes it, and retypes it 15 times before sending it. It has that almost clinical vibe to it. It means it's way more accurate, but it also means the vibe is off. So when people say they much prefer Claude, what they're saying is the vibe is much better with Claude. The way they feel using Claude is significantly better. O3 can solve problems better. It can solve hard problems significantly better. See everybody in chat? I feel seen, sounds familiar. Claude's great for asking it follow-up questions. Yeah, you can ask Claude a follow-up and it does better, but you have to tell it to do that. It can't do it itself. But yeah, for the most part, people agree the vibes are on. I have not felt the best about the vibes of 4.5, especially for code stuff. It's not very good at code from my experience. But yeah, it depends what you're looking for. 4.5 is more... I don't want to go too deep on the vibe of 4.5. I just really haven't used it enough to feel strong. But yeah, I know it's not 100% true. The transfer model does interesting things. Like the way that it's using the tokens that have generated to figure out what's next is considerate of things beyond what I'm saying. I'm trying to simplify it so you could better understand. There are other channels that are much better at all these things. You hopefully get the essence of what I'm trying to communicate here fine, though.
This is just vibe talking. Okay, is this just vibe talking? Is that what I'm saying here? Because I don't remember that being true, right? I think that at least is, so if I guess I'm taking Teapot as, the problem is I'm taking Twitter as a representation of reality, which it's not. Like the one thing you can always rely on is that Twitter largely does not represent reality. But as far as I can tell, every coder I've seen on there has said that Anthropic's Claude is just much better, generally speaking. Now, I don't really use Gyppities to program. I find that iteration loop to be very frustrating, and I can just write it myself better, faster.
A lot of devs also find Python to be better than Go. Just saying.
And then I have concern about the future and where I'm going. So I typically don't. I just cannot use it. It just makes me, so frustrated. Most of Twitter just writes JS. It's true.
One other important point here is that a lot of the way that we're generating code in tools like Cursor is it's auto-completing, it's tab completion, it's like filling itself out as you go. Claude is really good at that because it's spitting out token by token. Models like O3, reasoning models, it takes way longer for them to start responding, so you don't get to cut it off as quickly. You don't get to catch it when it's making the mistake and stop it and re-roll. Re-rolls feel more expensive because it takes longer before you can start reading the answer because it has to go through all the reasoning before you can actually see what it's outputting. O3 Mini is an incredibly fast model, especially for a reasoning model, but the speed it takes for you to start reading the response is much worse than it is with something like Claude. And all of this really just plays into that vibe side.
Episode. Diana, do you want to talk about the models that people are using, the IDEs that the people are using? There's some really interesting trends there.
NeoVim?
Yeah, I think as we mentioned a couple episodes ago, we already saw this in the shift started happening.
I feel bad for Prime.
The Vibe started to shift back in summer 24 when Cursor was being used by a big portion of the batch. And now, by far, is the leader. But the other thing that's happening, this is a very fast and moving environment. Windsurf is a fast follower. It's starting to be a very good product as opposed to Cursor. And I think, Jared, you have some first experience with why Windsurf is better than Cursor.
Yeah,
I also have one more question. What happens to somebody who's flying on an airplane and they want to code? Are they like are you just completely stuck in the water? If
Starlink, my guy. Come on, you know better, Prime. We got Starlink on the way.
you don't have internet access, or you don't, or just Amazon's down, are you just like literally effed? Is that
On one hand, I've been where he is describing, and when I'm in an Uber with crappy Wi-Fi trying to like quickly fix a feature, it sucks. I do miss the AI tools more than I thought I would in those environments. That's when you really recognize how fucky things are. But at the same time, I can't remember the last time I worked in a code base that actually fully works fine offline. Like if US East 1 is down, you're down. The likelihood you can get anything done in that time is already relatively low. Hell, if GitHub is down, I usually can barely code because I'm so often like having to go over there to reference shit to figure out what's actually going on in my project, or switching branches and trying to make sure it's up to date. When these dependencies of our lives go down, when these things that we rely on for our dev work goes down, it always sucks. And I think it's silly to pretend that we can fully work offline when nobody does anymore. So the airplane point is funny, and I've felt handicapped when I don't have all of Cursor's features because my internet sucks or they are down. That is a real thing I've experienced here and there, but I've experienced the same when GitHub goes down. And I think we should actually be much more hostile towards GitHub going down. The fact that their uptime is like 1.9 of reliability now is horrifying, and we should be flaming them constantly for it.
like the world we're approaching where it's just like, internet's off, everybody go home, get the hell out of here, we got nothing.
There was a time when I was at Twitch and AWS was down, and we all just kind of went and hung out in the cafeteria and or went home. I can think of multiple times where it's like, oh, AWS is down, let's go grab a beer. It's already like this.
I think the number one reason that people are switching is that Cursor today largely needs to be told what files to look at.
Just to be fair, just to kind of go back to the previous point, coding on an airplane tends to be where I do my best coding. Reason being is that I'm fully off the internet almost all, because anytime you try to use the internet, even on an airplane, largely it's spotty, it's super frustrating. Sometimes it's like 45 seconds just to go to a website. And so often I will think through problems that I need to solve that are very hard and annoying that I don't need to that I can solve by not Googling, right? It's like a big thing that I solved last airplane ride was that I have this large product. That's how I do all my TTS and all that runs through here. Oh my gosh, it broke. I have it. Oh, whoopsies. I already have it running right here. It's already running. Oh, whoopsies. Okay, there we go. Anyways, and one of the big things I did was that I added a bunch of testing that I can do that I could just like actually test full integration style from a unit test, the whole product. And it was just something that I knew that I needed to get done because I kept having these dumb little bugs. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And this is like an airplane kind of coding. I want airplane coding here. And it was actually really, really, really awesome.
This is my Uber coding, isn't it? This is the same thing. I have like 5 tangents I'm fighting going down, but this video is already way too long. I'm going to pick the one that I think is the most valuable. I might be picking wrong. I don't necessarily care, though. This is also a rant that has a video queued up. It's called AI Has Rewired My Brain. One of the things I actually love about AI is that this thing he's describing, this offline, Google wouldn't help me anyways, difficult problem solving, is one of my favorite things about engineering. I love sitting there and thinking about really hard problems and figuring them out when the internet wouldn't have helped me anyways. I do a lot of that. Like I built my own freaking sync engine for T3 chat, and every resource online led me down the wrong path. Those challenges are much more interesting now than they used to be, because previously the way I would do this, like let's say I'm working on some really hard problem, I would spend a day or two thinking about it, usually like just on a background thread in my brain while doing other things, spend the rest of that week building it, run into a ton of problems, spend the weekend thinking about it even more, and then the next week rewrite the whole thing, and after a 2-ish week window, I have it done. But I'd spend a little time up front overthinking, a bunch of time implementing, more time reflecting, and then finally do it right the week after. The crazy thing with AI now is I'm putting more time thinking ahead, where I'm spending more time thinking about how the thing and the part should come together. So instead of spending 2 days, I might spend 4. But I can get through that whole loop that took a week and a half before, where I build the first version, I see problems, I think about them, and I fix them. Since I thought about it more, I'll often skip some of those things. And I can build that first version in an hour instead of a day or two, run into the problems I would have run into by hand otherwise, blow it out and do it again and get it right. it's compressed that 2-week window down to a week, and I'm doing more thinking up front. And it's actually been really nice. I always wanted to be more that way, but I felt irresponsible not getting an implementation out early. Now the implementation, that first prototype, that first version of a thing is so fast that I can put more effort thinking up front, get a better model in my head, and then go through that iteration process significantly faster. That has to do with more experience. That helped. That's how I went to the spending 2 days up front thinking. I don't think most devs should start by overthinking. I think they should spend, depending on the difficulty of the problem, spend a little bit until you have a theory that you can't disprove in your head. A lot of it's how long do you have to think about a thing before you hit the wall where you have to try it to figure it out. My skill has improved to a point where I can think longer before I hit that wall. It's helped me a bunch. It isn't the source of all of my improvement over the years, but it's been a meaningful change that I'm actually quite excited about.
To do airplane coding, because it's like I get to just build something that I want to solve a problem.
That's a much better way of putting it. The implementation cost is now much less, so I'm freer to think about possible solutions. Yeah, that's the overall thing. And I feel like I'm spending more of my code time thinking about hard problems than I ever have in the past, and I love that. It makes it more fun for me, for sure.
That requires no internet. That requires no starting of anything. I want to just be able to just solve the thing quickly. And it actually feels really nice. It's, prison coding. It's actually something that kind of changes your mind and changes your perspective of how you do something. And it does require you to have a bit of a mastery over the language you're using and the space you're working on. It's pretty fun. I think it can really change a lot of your perspectives because it's like you exploring the space in the way you think it's best to solve a problem versus somebody giving you a path. There's this whole concept called anchor biasing where if you say, hey, how much do you think this movie cost to make? And I say 200 million, you're going to base your answer off of the term 200 million unless if you know the answer, right? If you knew nothing about how much does X cost and I say an answer, you're going to just draft off my answer. You're going to be like, oh shit, okay, maybe 150 million, right? Whereas if you would have answered it before me, you might have gave a vastly different answer because you're not kind of biased towards that. And so by always relying on these tools, you tend to end up being very biased towards what they first tell you the answer could be. And you kind of work down this potentially a local optima that's not quite as good as it could be if you were to kind of explore the space in your own kind of creative way. And so there's this kind of just fun thing. I love airplane coding.
Remember the thing earlier where Prime said this is a learned behavior? You can develop this mindset without AI. I'm going to flip the same back on him. The mindset of not getting stuck on one path is something that great developers all need to develop. And it doesn't matter where that path came from. If it came from a bad assumption they had, if it came from a conversation they had with somebody else they misunderstood or got the wrong lesson from, if it came from an AI telling them to go this way, your willingness to throw away the wrong solution from the root is an essential mindset shift to go through. One of the skills I'm most proud of, and I've been trying to find ways to explain it well enough to help others develop it, my ability to detect when the path we're going down is wrong and pull out is way better than average. And I often find myself in engineering conversations with people on my teams, people in other companies, whatnot, where my role is effectively to come in and say, this whole path you're going down is wrong, reset. And I totally agree with Prime that people get stuck this way all the time, but it's a mindset you have to work through, nothing to do with the tooling at all. And I don't know if the AI tools are going to make this more likely or not. All I know is that I have developed a skill to get around this, and I hope others do too.
It's an amazing kind of process because it's just you trying to creativity your way out of hard problems. It's just this unique way. It's very fun. It's one of my favorite forms of programming.
In your code base, so if you have a large code base, you can tell what to do, but you have to tell it where to look in the code base. Windsurf indexes your whole code base and is pretty good at figuring out what files to look at on its own. There's other differences.
He's just wrong about a lot of the comparison stuff here with the different IDEs. Cursor indexes your whole code base too. I don't know what's going on with the way he's using these things where Windsurf was better at whole code base problems than Cursor. I've had the opposite experience. The only thing Windsurf is good at doing is running random bash commands for you. If you don't know how to get the project running on your machine, Windsurf's a lot better. But from my experience, it is not good at actually solving hard problems in my code base.
Too, but I think that's the most important one at the moment.
No.
Quick question: one for Windsurf, two for Cursor. If you've used both, I'd love to see your opinion. Or if you just use one for Windsurf, two for Cursor. One for Windsurf, two for Cursor. Yeah. Okay. Strangely, a lot of zeros. I guess not too strangely. I think, again, I index into probably the non-founder chat. Like, the reality is most of you probably aren't founders. This is, I bet you if we were to redo this poll, but we did it, say, in Theo's chat, it'd probably be a very different set of answers.
Let's do it. Which IDE? Yeah, that's what I fucking thought. I'm sorry, I don't get the windsurf hype at all. I don't know who these people are. All of the windsurf type people I've talked to have been coding for less than a year. I don't know serious devs using windsurf right now, and I feel bad talking so much shit. I just don't know them. I haven't met these people. I can't find them anywhere. If you're an experienced dev that's actually using windsurf every day as your IDE of choice, that has tried Cursor and found windsurf to be better, and you make over $100K a year doing software development, DM me. I am so curious. I want to pick your fucking brain because I don't get it. I've seen windsurf. Windsurf seems genuinely better for somebody who's learning how to code. But for everyone else, it makes no fucking sense to me. Also, this is crazy. Cursor and VS Code Vanilla, neck and neck. There are as many people on Cursor, at least from my admittedly biased community, as there are VS Code users not using an AI chat app. That's nuts. That's nuts. This is huge change. The most popular IDE had not shifted in our space for like 8 years. VS Code, as it was, has been the standard since fucking 2018. And in almost no time, we have a split poll here. This is crazy. We're in a wild moment of change right now. And obviously, VS Code plus Copilot still wins. But at 35%? The biggest editor in any subcommunity being 35% was unimaginable even a year ago. This is wild. But also, Windsurf getting 2 votes kind of makes my fucking point. Anyways.
Not founders, not going to make it. Facts of life. I'm just saying, I think we'd actually, like, if you did it in, if Levels.io were to do the exact same poll, I think you'd also see a very different percentage of people using one thing versus the other thing.
I think the number of windsurf people in his audience shows how far he's broken out of the like deep nerd bubble, and I'm proud as fuck of him. The fact that Prime can consistently get 250,000 views on a video that's a day old is unbelievable. But it means he has a lot of people who are less experienced in his audience too. Those people have less money to spend, so windsurf's attractive to them, and they have less experience, so windsurf's attractive to them.
Devin does get mentioned, but the drawback of Devin not really being used for serious features is that it doesn't really understand the code base.
Also, I know I'm being spicy about windsurf right now. If you disagree with what I'm saying and our experience and just genuinely have had a better experience with windsurf, I will not flame you for sharing that in chat. Don't think I'm going to do the thing where I go ape shit on someone. I actually just genuinely want to understand because it's so different from my experience using it.
Is being used mostly for small features and barely mentioned.
Damn, Devin got
people
wrecked.
Still use
I've used a lot of Devin.
And the reason they use it is because they want to actually use the reasoning models. So that's get posted. People post some of the debugging questions to.
I know at least 20 or 30 of the people in the current batch are using T3 chat. They started after this video was recorded, but also if you're a YC founder watching this, you get a free for 1 year coupon in the Bookface deals page. Go check that out. A lot of YC founders seem to have missed that.
To figure out use the more powerful models for reasoning. Because right now, Cursor, Windsurf are still in the old world less than 6 months ago, of pre-reasoning models, not in the test time compute. So founders are using that. And there's some founders, some of them are self-hosted as well, self-hosting models, because maybe they have more critical, sensitive IP. They do that. And now, talking about the shifts in terms of...
I do want to pause. I actually think that there's an entire world that does exist where it's like customized or ragged out, ragged and fine-tuned and all the proper words here, models that are locally running for companies that are the best, right? I think I do think that there is like a big future there that actually could... that a bunch of companies want, right? You tune it on your architecture. You tune it on all these things just to see just to hopefully get somewhere with it. Okay, new poll. Someone is asking, well, what are you? Question mark. I'm just going to put student / learning to code. Professional, 9 to 5 kind of guy. Freelancer, right? Which is 9 to 9 the next day. What's the other one? Not a non-coder. Here for vibes. You're just here for the vibes, right? Just here for vibes. Is there anything else? Well, because if you're unemployed,
Founder?
Or unemployed, right? This is what you are a professional. You just happen to be unemployed at this point, or founder, or you're a founder, right?
Cool. Let's do the same poll. Which are you? Very interesting. I also have no idea how his poll splits here. I am very excited to see how his poll goes. Very interesting. One other big difference here, as silly as it might sound, you guys probably think I'm over-indexing on this. I'm not. I'm right. The time of day we stream matters a lot here, both in that the audience that's around at a given time is different, but more importantly, the audience we've built for our live streams due to the times that we stream is entirely different. So if I was to start regularly streaming at the same time he does, I would expect my numbers to skew in the direction of his.
What if it's a combination? If you're working and you're a full-time employed, then you'd be an employed even if you're in school. I'm actually just curious what kind of the breakdown is, because my guess is that I'd index heaviest into professionals, then students, and I did assume that non-coders are my smallest section. Yep, and founders. I'm surprised actually founders are bigger than freelancers. I genuinely thought founders and freelancers, in some sense you're kind of the same batch. Founder mode. Got to pump those numbers up. Hey, the 10.
Yeah, this is what I thought. This was the big difference. Oh wait, no, we're both exactly 25% on students, huh? I would have expected lower than that for me. Interesting. Our numbers are like identical here, actually. Yeah, 6% freelance, 60% pro, 6% freelancer, 2-7. I'm a little lower on pro, a little higher on freelancer, and a little higher on founder. Are we the same on founder, actually? Yeah. So I'm a tiny bit lower on pro and higher on freelancer, but that's about it for the differences. We're actually very similar here, which is interesting. I think we were both wrong here. We both assumed the answers would be very different, and they're not. It's also, there's a huge gap between the live audience and the non-live audience, but that was interesting.
People that are here for just the vibes and aren't even coders, I want to let you know, appreciate you, okay? You specifically, can't even believe it. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Addicted to pain? Absolutely. I voted wrong? Well then, dude, then you probably...
I also have way more people for the vibe, though, right? Yeah, 6%. Look at that. More by the numbers, too, even though I have a third as viewership right now. That's nuts. Thank you all for hanging out.
Don't even deserve to vote on this anyways. All right.
They do that. And now talking about the shifts in terms of models. The thing about CodeGen, the big game in town that we saw 6 months ago was Claude Sonnet 3.5. It's still actually a big contender. Most are still using it. But O1, O1 Pro, and O3 Meaning, all these reasoning models are starting to see, it's almost like getting neck to neck now close with Sonnet 3.5.
I don't get the O1 and O1 Pro usage. They're just too slow. And O1 Pro is so unreliable when you use it. It just takes so long to respond. If a problem's hard enough that I want O1 Pro to help me with it, I'd probably rather just do it myself. O3 Mini's been a huge thing for me, not just because it's like cheaper, but it's so much faster. It's so fast, and I genuinely really like it. And so I saw some people saying it's an O1 legacy. No, there's no O3 yet. It's just O3 Mini. So O1 is still the best reasoning model by OpenAI. It's just O3 Mini is really good. But O3 Mini was also rushed out because they were scared of DeepSeek. And O3 Mini's price is exactly double DeepSeek's, and tell me that wasn't by design. They're not pricing something at $4.40 unless they're going after someone else directly.
Other one is 4.0, virtually no use for CodeGen. And the other interesting thing is DeepSeek R1.
The problem is Gemini had such a stupid initial launch that when people are like, hey, you should try out Gemini, I'm just like...
Oh no, Gemini 2 Flash is actually quite good. It's a default on our site for a reason. But yeah, the original Gemini was garbage. I see why you'd feel that way.
Okay, right? Like, dude, I just like, what are you trying to convince me to use Gemini? Dude, that's crazy.
It has like the longest context window. I've heard from a couple of founders that they do use it, and the way that they use it is they put their entire code base into the Gemini context window, and they just like tell it to like...
That's because their entire code base is just a bunch of glue for NPM packages, so it's only a few hundred lines long.
Fix a bug, and
that's how people were getting by using everything with Cursor plus Claude. Yes. But 1 million tokens is kind of insane. That's a lot of fucking code.
It doesn't always work, but like sometimes it can just like one shot fix stuff because it's the whole thing in the context window.
It will be interesting to see as people get more adoption on the newly released reasoning models with Flashback 2.0.
Oh, shit, this is actually cool. Barrel of Lube here's sister apparently worked on Gemini. Super cool. And I totally agree with the custom TBUs. That's the reason Gemini is so good. Google has this weird advantage that no one else does, where they have all the data they need to train, all the scientists they need to make the good models, and the architecture and like CPU like stuff that they DIY'd in order to make them really, really fast. There is no other place that has all three of those things. There's a lot that have one and maybe two, but no one else has all three, which puts them in a crazy position right now. Like for Google to lose the AI race now, they have to massively screw up, which to be fair, massively screwing up is kind of like the DNA of Google. That's their brand. But if they can steer away from that at all and do like anything right going forward, it's going to be hard for them to lose.
I don't think people have tried it yet.
I don't know what
But the
Flashback
long
2.0
context
is.
window plus reasoning could be a good contender. What is the estimated code that's being written by LLMs in the current Badger?
Hi, this is pretty crazy. So we explicitly asked this question: what % of your code base do you estimate is AI generated? The way I interpreted the question is like, like of the actual characters in your code base, not including any libraries that you imported, like a percentage of like the characters were like typed by human hands versus like emitted by an LLM. And the crazy thing is 1/4 of the founders said that more than 95% of their code base was AI generated.
Wow.
Prime's going to have a lot to say here. This one hurts me a bit too. I just wanted to go up front with that. 95% of the code I generate might be AI, but of the code I commit, less so. So let's see what he has to say.
I think that's kind of a dumb answer, I think this is kind of a bad question. I think a better question is, of the lines of code, how much was exclusively 100% generated by AI versus some level of human interaction? Because you could also say, sorry, I coughed so hard that I'm literally crying right now. Because, if you're programming and I go view, if I go like view, yes, dot, yes, right? It's kind of like, what percentage of that code did I even type, right? I didn't type a lot of code. I just used my LSP to type a whole bunch of code. What percentage are they actually doing? So if you generate a line and say I start typing view, and then I do that and go, no, I don't want that. Actually, I want this. And then I do, I want that, but no, I don't want this. I want, like, what percentage is it actually generating? It's kind of hard to call that 90%, right? If you have to go back and correct what an AI does, it doesn't feel like it's doing, it's not, because characters themselves aren't good. I don't think that's a good measurement of it. It should be unaffected, like untouched lines of code that were purely generated by LLMs. Like that would be a pretty great response, because if it critically catches none of it, like if you have to constantly rewrite stuff, but you're feeling like the LLM's doing a lot, I mean, people are really notoriously bad at predicting percentages. Like that is just not good.
Which is like an insane.
So I'm not sure about. I don't know about that.
And it's not like we funded a bunch of non-technical founders. Like every one of these people is like highly technical, completely capable of building their own product from scratch. A year ago, they would have built their own product from scratch, but now 95% of it is built by an AI.
Except
from scratch, NPM.
for maybe it sounds like we have one or two examples of people who they're so young that they learned to code in the last 2 years, so they actually don't know a world where cursor didn't exist.
Then I would argue they're probably not super technical. It's very hard for someone to know a lot and completely rely on these AI tools. I'd be very shocked. I would personally be very shocked if you used only something like cursor your entire time you learned how to code, and then you end up just using that. If you had to go offline, could you actually do anything? And I do use it regularly. When I don't want to learn how to do something, when there's just certain parts of coding that I don't care about, like there's one that I knew what it was. Like, hey, I just need you to take tree sitter and parse the C++ and let's build out like a depth chart. I used that to find cool stuff, and that was fine. I didn't need to go read a document. I just wanted to get some stupid tool done, and I wrote it super poorly. The tool was absolute garbage. I went back and made some basic changes to it, but I was completely okay, effectively vibe coding my way through that. If you will call it vibe coding, because I pretty much went and I'm going to throw away all the code and never use it again. So I don't want to like discount where like the awesomeness of AI. But at the same time, I really do hope that you guys feel excited and you want to learn.
Yep, I am fully aligned here. There are so many things that get in the way when you're trying to build something that they can like hurt your motivation and keep you from going all the way with that project. Worst feeling ever. I love that AI could take those parts, those annoyances, like figuring out the Wrangler TOML file and make them go away so I can get back to the fun part and actually building the important thing. That's awesome. And it's one of the best parts of these tools. The problem is when you start optimizing away all of the pain, you don't go through it. And if you don't go through it, you don't get good. You have to do the work. And if you don't, you'll struggle. If you use these tools to maintain motivation because they let you skip the annoying, tedious things, and also as like an assistant that you can ask questions and learn from, those can make you level up much better. But if you're using it to avoid anything that is hard, you're not going to find success.
Everything, understand why it's bad, then take the vibes you produced, which is also synonymous with the word horseshit, take that and reform it into something that's actually useful.
One of my best companies, this batch, actually is exactly this. The founders are extremely technical minds, but they're not classically trained in computer science and programming. And they are incredibly productive and able to produce just a ton of like really amazing product. And AI is writing almost the entire thing.
It kind of makes me think a lot of the discourse around
It's
sort of
possible.
Gen Zs are the first digital.
I do want to say that there is, I know for me that's horrifying, but at the exact same time, there is something kind of awesome about that anybody with enough tenacity can make something. So there is something cool, and hopefully they get program pilled and they want to learn how to program. Like I would really love, I mean, I do love that. Like I do love that aspect that people are getting accidentally program pilled and they want to learn how to program because of LLM. So there is a good part, and I don't want to like completely discount that kind of stuff. Right? Why is it horrifying? Because the software they're going to produce is going to be just so difficult. The thing is that when they sell, when they exit, when they actually bring on engineers, like, I mean, if you've ever worked in some old code bases where it's just like the absolute utter wild, wild west, like there are just things that just become so effing difficult. And it can be very hard. Like there are some pretty awful experiences out there. Like here's a good example of some awful experiences right here. Like this code does exist. You've used this code. You've played with it. You just didn't realize it was being executed, right? That's all. And so there, but somebody had to write that and somebody had to maintain that. Hadouken code, yeah.
Native that grew up with the internet. This is like the generation that grew up with native AI coding tools that they skip the classical training of a software engineer and they just...
Classical training being a React boot camp in 6 months. No, I mean, the nice part is that computer science is largely irrelevant compared to what programming is, at least in our day and age, because we have created a world in which programming is becoming more of a trade than anything else. So it's like you don't need to know the fundamentals of why metal melts at a certain temperature to be able to weld. You just know that you need to use this amount of hot, make this go good. And I get good at the actual activity of it, not at the theory of it. And that's fine. I think that's what programming is turning into.
Yes, we won him over. I missed that part, but I am so happy with that conclusion because I've thought about this for fucking ever. The example I always give is skateboards. I come from skateboarding. You don't get better at skateboarding by sitting in class and being told how the skateboard works, like what types of wood are used and where the history of the wheel is. You get better at skateboarding by taking a board, going outside, and getting hurt over and over again until somehow you ride away. That doesn't mean the foundations and the fundamentals aren't useful. It doesn't mean you don't benefit from understanding the difference between different types of trucks. But the more you're on the ground going, the more you'll be able to understand the importance of those things and ask the questions to figure out what differences matter. I've always felt that way, especially about programming. And I've always gotten in fights with these fundamentals people, like the people who are always pushing that you need to learn all the names of all the different patterns for data management, all the different structures, all the different shit. I hate it. I've always hated that because I'm better at foundations and fundamentals than a lot of those people. And those people, they annoy me. You get good at the fundamentals that matter when you run into problems the fundamentals solve. And as long as there are good paths for you to discover those things later on, you're going to understand coding much better if you learn your algorithms 2 years in than if you learn them before you know how to use an if statement. This is the least bad Bob Martin take I've seen in a while, actually. Because the number of programmers is going up constantly, the average experience isn't meaningfully improving. That's a fair point and a good way of putting that. I can't believe I'm agreeing with the Bob Martin take.
Just do it with the vibe. But they are actually very technical minded. I mean, they have degrees in math and physics.
Yeah. Exactly.
So they have that raw, let's call it more like system thinking type of mind that you still need. Maybe we should talk a bit about that. It's like, what's still the same and what has changed?
I think this
I talk about this all the time. The ability to think through the system and figure out what is and isn't working, and using that all to identify the problems that you have is insane. If you don't have that, you're fucked. You've always been, but you are now more than ever. Those skills went from being essential to be a senior to principal dev to being viable at all.
vibe coding will enable people who have those kinds of technical minds, who come from other technical disciplines like math and physics, to become highly productive as programmers much faster than it was in the past. Like I remember there were like coding boot camps, like back in the day, they would try to like retrain physics people into programmers, and then like it didn't work that well because it just takes too long to learn all of the syntax and all of the libraries and all the stuff that you have to know to be really productive. But like now it's a new world.
The coding.
This is like literally the C.S. Lewis abolition of man chapter 3 argument, which is that we want to turn something from a quality into a quantity. It's purely reducing things into productivity.
To be fair, we have been charging companies way too much money for ourselves as coders for a while. A lot of the effort, everything Google pisses money into, from AI to all the coding boot camps to the Google Summer of Code to the crazy workshops they do at colleges and all of this, all the effort, marketing, funding, and everything going into helping people learn to code is because they're trying to make developers cheaper so they can improve their margins. That's always been the case. It's just they want more, and I get it.
It's like, this is actually kind of a wild thing. It's just like a wild thing watching this happen again, where we are purely reducing man into just atoms and movement, and that's it.
Boot camps are also very specifically focused on getting you hired at companies, and I think it was around like 2015 era where just companies themselves are rethinking
also
how to
syntax is not the hardest part
in their hiring processes, and it was moving. There was a real.
I do want to say that when he says it takes to learn to long, it took me a long time to learn. Okay, I really struggled with recursion. I really was not a great programmer to begin with.
Kind of funny that he says he struggles with recursion considering the setup we have going here right now, but yeah.
But I had a really, 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 really high drive. And so my ability to have a really high drive absolutely dominated my inability to learn quickly, right? Because, yeah, I couldn't learn quickly. So instead of not being able to learn quickly, I just put in 15 hours a day. Like, that's a really easy way to make learn slow go fast.
So I'm going to say a controversial thing he probably won't agree with. If Prime was learning to code today, he would be a vibe coding fucking god, like a machine. The fact that he had that level of motivation and is no longer as blocked on what he's learned already so far, it would be unbelievable. Prime in this era, if he was to like restart today, if you were to reset his brain 15 years and drop him in the field right now, he would have had so much fun. Because he would still be coding 15 hours a day. He would just be putting out 5x more code. And that would have been incredible to watch. And there are people like this now, people who I know who were actually getting really good really fast already, just because they were putting the hours in, not because they were smart, but because they were working and putting in the effort. Those people can do crazy stuff with these new tools and technologies. And it's really cool to watch it as it happens, to watch these highly motivated people whose only enemy is their own knowledge, having access, not control, but access to more knowledge that they can probe and point and poke at using these AI tools. It lets them get that knowledge out much faster. They can get access to it in ways they couldn't before. That's so cool. Like, it's not many people have been in the position where they went really far past their peers and the people around them. There have been some incredible people that came out of this community that showed up here way younger than they should have been to be here and way less qualified than you'd expect them to be here, that were here because everyone they knew wasn't keeping up with where they were. They just cared so much more that they got to be like employable levels of engineering quality as a 16-year-old kid in India. The best programmer they knew was their teacher, and they went past them. What do you do then when you are the best programmer you know? Nexel mentioned, yeah, people like Nexel. It sucks so hard to be the best developer you know and to not have people you can go to ask questions. I felt this vacuum once in my life. When I was a freshman in high school, I joined the Linux club that was entirely seniors at the time. It was all the 18-year-olds, and they would invite me to things I shouldn't be at. I have so many crazy stories of hanging out with those guys. They were all incredible. Some of them are still doing dev work every day. Some of them just work in hospitals and stuff, but a handful went all in on the dev thing. And I was dual booting my laptop with Ubuntu when I was 12, thanks to those guys. But then the year ended and I was a sophomore and they all graduated. And I didn't have anyone who was better than me around anymore. And my mind just crumbled, not having people I could ask these questions, people I could look up to and aspire to. When that got, I don't want to say it felt like it was taken from me. And I lost this thing that was so exciting and important to me, that motivation. And I barely progressed for the next 3 years. From freshman year to senior year of high school, I did not improve at software because I didn't have anyone around me to look towards, any way to pace myself. I just was, and it's not like my peers weren't getting into software either. They were, but I was the only one that was let into the group of the Linux club. We reformed it as the computer club the next year, but it wasn't the same. It was a bunch of kids playing Minecraft now. It was no longer these wizards that I could learn from. And when I lost that, I just kind of fell off. If I was more motivated, I might have found other things. Senior year, I ended up finding the New Boston YouTube channel and learning enough Java to get a 5 on my AP exam. But other than that, I got nothing out of it. I just stopped improving as a developer for the rest of my high school experience because there was no one around me I could look to and say, oh, they're better than me. I want to get there. The best devs are the ones who don't let that stop them. And I like to think if I was starting today in that same position, the combination of social media, so I could have kept up with those kids, combined with the AI tools I could have used to push through those hard parts I got stuck on, I might have done much better. I might have gotten out of high school a decent programmer instead of having to go to college first. Because when I was in college, I was surrounded with incredible engineers, and that motivated me a ton. But in high school, I wasn't. And I'm not going to say it held me back. I held me back. But I held myself back because I wasn't motivated to keep going, because the further I got, the better I got, the more lonely I felt. And that sucks. And if these tools can help somebody feel less lonely and more productive, if it can help someone push through those things, that's awesome. That's really cool. And I absolutely would still have gone to college if I was a decent programmer coming out of high school. I generally push towards college because I got so much from my college experience, not even learning how to code, just being surrounded with other engineers. The connections are why college was valuable for me. The peers, the pacing myself with others was so valuable that if you go to college and you find out a year in like, this isn't for me, and you drop out, cool, fine, awesome. My CTO, Mark, we went to college together. I barely knew him there, but we knew of each other. And now he's my fucking best friend and the only reason I can do this stuff. Go to college. The connections are so fucking worth it. Anyways.
How often do I use recursion? Regularly. Recursion is extremely important.
Software engineers in their hiring processes, and it was moving. There was a real shift away from like, we want to hire classically trained computer scientists, whiteboard algorithmic problems, towards we actually want people who are just really productive and write code quickly. And some of these arguments are like evergreen eternal, right? Like I remember when Rails first came out, there was just like a real sense of, like active record as a way to like interact with your database was seen as,
I hear active record is still awesome,
but there was still this same flavor of argument, right? Like, like if you don't really understand the internals, like you're just going to write like crappy, low performant web software.
To be fair, they were right. The people who only learned active record and never learned how to actually do databases are the reason the fail whale happened on Twitter and the reason all these old like Rails code bases fell apart. It's also the reason why technologies like VIDS that makes Planet Scale and MySQL scale so well started to happen. A lot of those came out of the Rails world and the shitty queries they were writing. So benefits and negatives. But yeah, the bar being lowered so far to allow more people to ship good software quicker was awesome. And I will praise Rails forever for the revolution it represented in the introduction of this full stack way of thinking and building. That doesn't mean the software that came out was always good, though.
How do you feel those
arguments
arguments
did happen, by the way, did happen
aged,
a lot.
If you look back on it now?
My feeling is that many of the most successful companies, I would say Stripe, Gusto are just two that really spring to my mind as ones that really heavily leaned into the actually, we just want people who are really productive with the tools, and we're going to change our whole hiring process to just select for people who are good at
Isn't Stripe like known as being one of the single worst libraries ever to work with in the universe? Isn't it?
No. I will jump on as Stripe's number one hater. I'll jump on this. Stripe revolutionized DX in a space where DX had never even been considered before. It set a new bar for the expectation developers have integrating services. It was the first like SaaS that you would integrate via lines of code into your code base without having to plug it into their infra. It was magical. It changed how we think about integrations. So much of the stuff that we know and love today would never have happened if Stripe didn't do what it did as early as it did. There are two problems with Stripe. The first is that payments are an inherently complex thing that results in inherently complex integrations because getting payments right is difficult. Just sheer size of Stripe and the fact they have to maintain the exact way it works in the past with today while also handling all the new expectations these payment processors and providers have. But also the bar that they set has since been passed. If the DX quality we expected was 2 out of 10, they set a new bar at 6. They 3x'd it. Now we're expecting 8 and 9. They haven't made it there yet, but they care a ton. They're trying. They had me to their frickin' all hands to do a call and an interview with the CEO because they cared so much about my feedback. They want to win. They listen. They care. They will win. I would not want to compete with Stripe, especially right now. Shout out to the companies that are trying. I want to see Polar win, but at the same time, Stripe cares a ton and they do ship things that are incredible. I hope that my shit talking on the absurdity that is integrating payment systems through Stripe does not imply that Stripe isn't one of the most absurd achievements in the history of software.
Just like, isn't Stripe just like god awful? Stripe is a piece of shit. Okay, Stripe's API is nonsensical. Oh, okay.
With the tools, and we're going to change our whole hiring process to just select for people who are good at, like, the interview shifted from teach us how you think to you've got 3 hours on a laptop and you need to build a to-do list app and build it as quickly as you can. And those companies have had a tremendous amount of success. It does seem like at some point as they grew and they scaled, then the bottleneck did actually become having people who are classically trained and systems thinkers to sort of scale up and architect things. And to your point, like now it's actually just cheaper to like re-roll and just like write everything from scratch than try and debug. Like the skills might just be completely different.
I mean, we do, to be completely fair, this panel and me have very different motivations, right? This panel entire goal is to find companies or to find a group of people who need funding, fund them, get the product into some level of profitability / sellability. And then when I say profitability, meaning like you need to be able to get like $100,000 annual revenue, reoccurring revenue, and then you're going from seed round into Series A and all the different things that kind of go into trying to get a company so that you can get Series A, Series B, and then you can make your exit making $1 kajillion, right? And so it's like what they want at the end of the day might be different than what a lot of people who work at the result of these companies want, meaning that
mostly agree with him here so far. I will make the request to my editor to chop until this guy had just started talking because most of the hiring stuff was nonsense. I just want this one piece. The thing that most people don't appreciate about YC, like there's levels of understanding of like how well do you understand YC and like how they do what they do. And it's really hard to hit a certain level of that understanding unless you're in. I feel like I'm talking about Scientology here, but just hear me out. There's a lot of people who mix up YC and VC. They assume that it's just one and the same. All VC is bad. Shit on YC whenever they see anything from it. Prime is not at that level. Prime understands much deeper where YC's focus is, which is how do you ship something that people actually want to use and get far enough that you can get to the next stage so that you can hit that Series A, so you can hit those MRR numbers, so you can get this product at a point where it's actually a real company. I totally agree with him on that. The one piece I want to add here, which is the next level, is that you need to understand who's at this table and where they came from, what their histories are, and the people that they talk to. These guys, sure, talk a lot to these really early stage companies during the batch, but up until recently, there were only 2 batches a year, and they were 3 months. The other 3 months for each other, so 6 months of the year, was spent with no startups around, and they'd spend that time talking to the ones who wanted to talk. And most of them were the ones that were further along, maybe years along, that just wanted their thoughts on these harder problems that come up over time. I just did a talk with Michael Seibel on Tuesday and got a ton of great information and ways of thinking about my business as T3 Chat scales. They're an awesome crew, and they talk to people who have gone through all of it, and half of them have gone through it themselves. The guy right here is one of the founders of TripleByte, which is a massive company that has helped streamline technical interviews that a lot of the companies we work at and are talking about here, like the big ones, all use. These guys know what those scaling problems look like, but there's something more important. You have to be able to get there in the first place. If you were to build in a way that scaled early, you're less likely to make it to the next step because you're putting more effort in every step. You have to find the balance here. And I think YC is one of the few groups of people that understands both sides of this coin. They present themselves like they only understand one. So Prime's not wrong for making these assumptions. I had much worse assumptions about these guys before I was part of the crew and I would talk to them regularly. They know their shit. They've been around for a while.
Like when you are working at a place that's like maybe Series C or Series D and it's been around for a long time, the choices that were made in Series A have a much different feel for you than they did during the time of Series A.
One tiny addition there, having watched a couple companies and like I've been an investor in some companies that have made it to these C, D, F IPO stages, the biggest mistake they make in those early stages has nothing to do with the tech. It's the hiring. Usually they hire too aggressively too early. The biggest mistake, and I've seen a bunch of these companies make this mistake, is they raise their Series A, they have a whole bunch of money in the bank, they button up and say, okay, we're a real company now. It's time to do things the real company way. They hire a bunch of backend engineers, they hire a bunch of support engineers, they hire a bunch of designers. They act like a big company when they're not one yet, and they start making the big company tech decisions, building heavily into Kubernetes when they don't need it yet, and doing these things. The companies that I've found run into the fewest problems are the ones who go out of their way to use the simplest, scrappiest solution for as long as they possibly can. And if they can swap to another simple, scrappy solution in order to avoid going for that big one later on, they do. And the smaller you can keep the team, the better. My team's half the size it was when I left YC because I started falling for this myself. I started overhiring and trying to be a real big company. And it took me a while to realize, oh, we're not growing fast enough for me to behave this way. I screwed up. So sadly, I had to do my least favorite thing, which is let go of people that didn't screw up themselves. None of the people I had to let go of at Ping were people who had made a mistake or done something wrong. It was more a matter of we had to adjust where we were going. And I went out of my way giving everyone generous severance and helping as many as I could find better gigs. But you have to like make this a point. One of the companies I was talking about investing to, they were raising way too much money, like an insane amount, because they could. The demand was unreal. But my concern was if you're coming out of the batch with $17 to $20 million in the bank, you're going to be tempted to go hire dozens of people. And I wanted to invest. I know this company's going to do well, but I didn't want to encourage the bad behavior of overhiring and all that. So I made the founder agree that they will have less than 10 engineers by the end of 2025 and less than 20 engineers by the end of 2026. And he, without hesitating, said, yes, absolutely. If I hire more than that, I screwed up. And I immediately handed him my phone to give me his info so I could invest. Because the biggest mistake is overhiring and trying to be the big company too early. Not that they bet the small, scrappy way and it didn't scale. I've seen that almost no times because we all know this shit's not going to scale. We all know we're going to hit a wall. I'm just consistently surprised how much further along that wall is than we expect. Even a company like Vercel, my favorite example of this, of like a scrappy thing. If I pick some random project that I have here, here's me trying to make that phone script. So we have lots of different files here. This project by Vercel. There's a big team working on this. It's a legit project at a billion-dollar company. Watch what happens when I right-click and hit rename. Oh, they changed it. That's hilarious. They did that because I roasted them. Up until 2 or 3 days ago at soonest, the right-click rename would use the browser built-in crappy little text input box because it was the quicker solution and it meant less work, less fragility, less things that could go wrong. When you do the scrappy thing, it's less surface area that can go wrong. Is it more likely something will go wrong in it? Perhaps. But the less surface area you have, the more likely you are to make it out of where you're trying to go. The bigger the solution is, the more likely you are to have bugs, and the harder it is to steer in a different direction if it turns out you were going the wrong way. The only thing that scales is simplicity. Everything else that says it scales is focusing on one dimension or is lying. Simplicity scales surprisingly well. It doesn't scale perfectly. You can't keep it simple forever. But if you put the effort in to maintain simplicity, you will get further than anyone else who doesn't.
So you might have different opinions at this point.
Rails, that battle was actually fought to a standstill because, of course, using active record or Rails allowed you to go from 0 to.
Glassy just said there's a company that fits this bill so heavily. Yeah, there's a example company in mind that I'm thinking of here for sure, and you know which one it is.
One very quickly, but then what happened at Twitter? It became the fail whale, right?
Yeah.
Like basically once you get to one, like one, that architecture will not get you to a billion or 10 billion or $100 billion in valuation or users or whatever. Like it's just not going to actually work. So I think
half agree. I think one of the coolest things that has happened, and this is one of the places where I don't agree with Gary because he's just not as tuned in on like modern dev tool stuff. The serverless revolution has allowed for a really good developer experience comparable to that of something like Rails in a way that actually scales. It's more expensive than if you did it the right way with dedicated servers, but the fail whale problem where your server can't handle the traffic, if you're building even somewhat competently, that problem is now gone, which is awesome. Just don't use Postgres unless you really know what you're doing.
you're going to see a
What was
the
Twitter in a
same
fail
thing.
whale?
And then there's new
Oh, fuck. Do people not know the fail whale? Back in the day, when Twitter would get traffic surges because like some news dropped or like some crazy thing happened with like the Queen in the UK, Twitter was a single giant Rails server that couldn't handle the traffic, so it would crash. And when it crashed, you'd get the fail whale. They had to re-architect everything to get out of this problem, but that's because the monolithic server way of building just doesn't scale for shit. And Twitch had to move off of this too. This is one of the many problems with Rails. It's a separate thing, but it is a good point. But we can't think of scaling solutions the same way that we used to because previously, good DX meant bad scale characteristics. Now with serverless, your bill might not scale great, but at the very least, your infra scales totally fine. It is basically impossible to go down if you build things even vaguely correctly using tools like Vercel, PlanetScale, and all the other tools and technologies I recommend here. And that's a huge change. And I wish that nuance could be injected here, but none of the parties in the video we're watching here are going to understand that nuance. YC is wrong here. Prime might actually be better about this here. I'm curious to see what he has to say.
He does bring up a really good point. TJ calls it yacht problems. Tej mentioned, by the way, he streams. I love that. I actually think that there is a lot of value in this mindset as well. So I'm kind of in this conflicted part where I kind of go back and forth on this, which is what is the value of producing horseshit code if your idea of horseshit code is to get something that works so you can prove that it works in the real world versus getting something that's actually going to be useful to actually hack on and make further features as time goes on. And so there's kind of like this, there's two different worlds that they're describing. And the world that he's specifically describing is called the yacht problem world, where you now have 1 billion users. You got yourself the yacht problem.
Yeah, the thing that I think has kind of changed here, which is cool, is that previously, when you got to the yacht problem where you had enough success that your stuff was falling over, you would have to hire the right people to dig you out of the hole you put yourself in. Now you can get pretty far just paying higher bills from your service providers, using things like AWS, using things like Vercel, PlanetScale, all the stuff we've been talking about. You can pay your way through that problem to the providers instead of having to hire the engineers. And as terrible as a $4,000 Vercel bill might be, paying 3 engineers $200K a year instead isn't that much better. And that's like to get to some pretty crazy scale too. You could also pay thousands of engineers $500K a year and pay AWS for tons of infra that you're not even using. That's what ends up happening. This video is already pretty long, so I did you guys a favor. There's a whole section here about interview best practice stuff. You've heard me talk about that all in the past. We're just going to skip through it and get back to the point.
I do think skills of reading code and debugging are maxim. Is like you have to have the taste and enough training to know that the LLM is spitting bad stuff or good stuff. So like bad code or good. And I think you can see it clearly sometimes if a candidate is using the tools and there's actually a reasonable solution that the LLM outputs and then the candidate is like, oh, this is actually bad. That is a sign. So I think knowing kind of more the higher level thinking to know what is good versus bad. In order to do good vibe coding, you still need to have the taste and you still need that kind of classical train, maybe not necessarily classical train, but enough knowledge to judge what's good versus bad.
What she's saying is that you need 10 years of programming and having to have a bunch of things go wrong and watching all of your programs turn into absolute crap. And then after going through that, then you actually understand what makes something good and what makes something bad. And when I say what makes something good, what makes something bad, I kind of have this general idea of all software. Oh, wow, that is a very white theme.
Oh, GIMP. Oh, GIMP.
And so, personally,
Let's see how his diagrams come out here. I'm excited.
I mean, I think every program can be broken down into a series of.
Is he using a mouse for that? That's got to be a drawing tablet, right? Like that has to be a drawing tablet from how that looks.
1 to 10,000 chunks of code. 1 to 10,000.
All mouse. Goddamn.
That's kind of how I look at almost every single feature. You rarely see something that is like whole.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. No offense to Prime. I love that he's drawing more. The visualizations help, but I've earned my right to be amused here. Let me be better at one thing, guys. One singular thing. My penmanship has been terrible my entire life. I've been nervous as hell whiteboarding in interviews my entire career. Excalibur unlocked a new part of me I had never seen. I'm going to laugh a little bit at this now. I've done my time. I've put the effort in. I'm going to laugh a little.
Whole in of itself that can't be abstracted by some sort of library or something that isn't in this. And so if you can figure out how to land into this and one-shot this, you typically can become a very good programmer because now you have a few interfaces you need to design through your system, and you can just kind of one-shot these 10,000s.
What is this even a diagram of?
Right? Classically trained. I know we call it classically trained, which is kind of like a joke to what I was. I mean, even my classical training is like not even classical training.
Yeah, I do agree that having the previous experience makes it much easier for you to get through using these tools. Somebody with 10 years of coding experience using these tools is very well off right now. People who are learning in this era, I have no idea what that's like. I don't have that mindset. It's hard for me to understand, but it is different.
My code tastes like olive oil. Hey, olive oil's good, okay? Olive oil's really good.
Goal trained, but enough knowledge to judge what's good versus bad. And you only become good with enough practice.
Yeah.
I think that will be one that will be constant. That would be my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just code, it's sort of like more like code review as the interview versus like actually like producing code.
Yeah, I mean, you could have some form of system design. You want to know how good they can put a product out there. So then it's testing for taste. So we want to test for debugging and then taste. But then how do you get to, I guess this is a question, going to these kids that you have that we call it AI coding natives.
Yeah.
How do you develop taste when you don't come from a classically trained world? Which would be interesting for next generation.
Well, you have to, because if you don't, the startup dies, right? So let's say this founder, they go off, they have 95% written by AI. The proof is in a year out, 2 years out, they have 100 million users on that thing. Does it fall over or not? And then
I don't think that's good proof either, right? Like, I don't think that's good proof. Writing code for 100 million users versus writing code for 10 users versus writing code for 10,000 users, those are all very different aspects, right? Yeah, whole of America. Yeah, just get all of America to use your products. Like, I don't think we should measure code like that, right?
These systems, in the first realm, the first versions of reasoning models, they're not that good at debugging. So you actually would need to descend down into the depths of what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And if you can't, then let's hope.
Okay, I'm going to go at a slightly different angle here. There are like fundamental characteristic differences that are important to recognize. Like, we don't have 100 million users for T3 chat yet. But if we did, I could list in order which things are going to break as we scale. The first 4 are going to be rate limits on the various like AI LLM providers that we work with. And I already have made the connections with those companies so that I can yell at them to get our rate limits increased, as well as strategies to work around them, things like OpenRouter to let me split my traffic across different providers. Then after that, I would have to manually scale up my database if I haven't yet. Probably have, and I know that my current database solution can absolutely scale that far. My previous one could not. I was seeing the way that the scale was going to fail us, so I moved off it really quickly so I wouldn't have to worry about that in the future. I know the button in the dashboard I have to go click on in order to deal with that scale problem when we get there. That's kind of it, though. The next thing's going to be support for sure. Our support layer is Mark responding to emails as fast as he can, where that's going to fail probably before the other two, just in terms of if we get a big enough group of users, what happens? I was asked, do I have this documented? Like, do I have the points of failure documented? Right here. It exists in 50% of our employees' brains because it exists in mine. And Mark knows where to go to fix it if it is broken, to me. We're good. And also, he knows all of these things too. There's no need to document things that 100% of the team is already aware of, but there's a real issue in the near future as we start to hire if we don't have these things documented. But I'm excited to fix that when we get there because we now actually are looking like we're going to get there, which is really cool. But yeah, we have almost no documentation beyond code comments describing what sins we have committed where.
So they can
like
go
stuff,
find
right?
another architect who, they're going to have to hire someone who can.
I think
You
it's
could
going to
start-
be a generation.
You could start a company that has 10,000 daily active users and use Google Sheets, like as a database. So I don't know if, I think there's a lot you have to think about. Now, does that mean you
Yeah, what matters here is a lot less like, can you hit 10,000 users? A lot more, can you coherently describe what will fail as you scale up? And if you can't describe where your failure points are, you're absolutely screwed.
I'm just saying you can. And so the amount of users shouldn't necessarily dictate that this is a good idea.
Of software engineers that are like good enough, because it's so easy to retool there with all these code-gen tools. Like the barrier entry is so low. You're going to be good enough engineers, there's going to be tons of those. But to be exceptional, like the top 1%, I think you're going to need to get into deliberate practice. I mean, the analogy we're talking about is Malcolm Gladwell popularized this concept of 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert, which came from this research from, what was his name?
Anders Ericsson.
Anderson Ericsson, right? Which it wasn't just, the research was very specific. It was about how do you find world-class violinists? And it
Let's go. You just knew it. I knew it would end up being, actually, you should just learn to program. Let's go.
It wasn't about just putting the time, but deliberate practice.
Good answer.
Hours that are actually planned and thought, and it's hard work. You could become an expert with less hours. So I think what's happening with now code-gen tools is that it's very cheap to put in the hours because the output is just so quickly. You can get to good enough. But to become the best in the world and the best founder, you're going to need that deliberate practice to go into the details. And you're going to have to peel the onion and understand the systems and get to, again,
okay, we're back in.
To some extent, being classically trained.
She almost had me there. I thought we were derailing, but no, we were back in. Good answer, dude. I do love that the ultimate answer is you just got to learn how to program. Yeah, because if you're reading code, you might need to know what good code looks like.
I mean, a good example is
she almost turned on me.
Is like Picasso, one of the greatest painters. He was amazing at drawing lifelike pictures.
Which is not what he's famous for. Of course, when you imagine a Picasso, you imagine the opposite of that.
Yeah.
There's this famous sequence of drawings on how he got to a abstract ball. It starts from being lifelike to iterations until he gets to the essence, to kind of the abstract art that he's very well.
When I watched this video originally, I spaced out at this part. Not the Prime one. I watched the original vibe code thing in the background while doing other things in the past. I didn't pay attention during this part, and I wish I did, because this is actually kind of how I feel about my code. Not in the artistic sense, like the art of my code is shit, but that I like start with the complex right thing and go through like, how do I strip this down to just the part I actually care about and throw away literally everything else? That's how I code. I really like thinking about my systems that way. How can I take the bull, the big thing that we all have an understanding of what it is, what it does, what its characteristics are? How can I just chop away every single thing there so just the essentials are here so I can get the thing I need?
But he could only get to be the best in the world because he was actually a very good painter and classically trained and could draw super well. But that's not what he's known for. So I do think we'll see these two classes of engineers. You'll still have like a very fat class of like good enough. You need engineers for those. But the best in the world, the founders that become outliers, are going to need to put in the deliberate practice.
Yes and no. I mean, I think there are lots of really amazing
hot take coming in. Here we go.
Examples of great systems level and world-class engineers who ended up being CEO and CEO of the biggest public companies in the world. I think of Max Levchin. I think of Toby Lutke from Shopify. I mean, these are people who just like actually that great. And the thing is, there are lots of other people who are not that great, but also still CEO or co-founders of companies. And then it kind of goes back to link up what we were saying earlier. It goes back to hiring.
I mean,
I would like to also say that just goes to show how much luck plays a huge factor in this. You can start an amazing company, but your amazing company is off by a year, 2 years, right? It's literally just like, oh, you're just too early.
If being a year too early is enough for your company to die, it wasn't meant to make it. You need to pace yourself so that you can survive waves. That's like, it is a skill of its own. And there are definitely people who suck as CEO and CTO, but are just so resilient, like the cockroaches. Cockroaches make surprisingly good CEOs, not because they're good at being CEOs, but because you can't fucking get rid of them. They just stick around and they'll be there forever. They'll be there through your entire life cycle. And by the time you're dying in the corner, you're like, wait, how are you still around? And they just smile and wave and brag about their burn charts. There is a skill there, but I agree, like, luck is a huge factor. But the way you maximize luck is by surviving so goddamn long that you can hit your lucky stride. That's what happened with us. If I didn't change the trajectory of Ping, we would have went out of business a year and a half ago with our trajectory and our burn rates when we left YC. If I hadn't cut us down by the end of that year, we would be very out of business by now. But I did, and I extended our runway from 6 months, or I think it was 8 or 9 months at that point, to 3 years. And now we're positive. Now we have infinite runway because we structured the business and made the right changes to get us there. And now we have the ability to survive however long we have to. And now, because we did all of those things, we managed to build a good, profitable product.
Luck and timing is just like, it's amazing what good skills and timing can create. And it's also amazing that no skills and timing can also create something similar.
I keep thinking about the Twitter analogy that you brought up, because I think it's a really interesting one. Like, if you compare Facebook and Twitter, in both cases, they went very quickly from 0 to 1 in sort of a scrappy, move fast, break things way. Facebook was able to solve the scaling technical challenges in a pretty impressive way. I think most people would agree.
I mean, Mark Zuckerberg was by far way more technical and way more in the weeds, probably.
Maybe, but I don't know. Like,
I think Twitter scalability challenges were also harder based on the usage patterns. Like, the thing about the usage of Facebook is that it grows, it's pretty smooth throughout the day. Like, people just use it all the time. The problem with Twitter is that the usage is incredibly spiky. You get like a Super Bowl or like a...
No, the problem with Twitter is that the engineering was straight up incompetence versus what was going on at Facebook, which was revolutionary. The engineers at Facebook are some of the best in the world that built things unimaginable at the time. Twitter never invented anything technically. Like, the few contributions Twitter made to like the greater software world, it's like Bootstrap. Everything else was kind of a disaster that came from those guys. Like, there is a difference in the technical capabilities in these areas.
You know, like a world event, and all of a sudden you have like 10 times as much usage. The way the fan out of the feed works is, I think, like fundamentally a very difficult computer science problem.
okay, that's fair.
Though I also think that they were like really hamstrung by their
100%,
tools. Do you remember using this terrible queue system, Starling? Like,
Absolutely.
I used it because I thought, oh, Twitter's so much bigger than us. They're so smart. They wouldn't use something that's crap. No, they totally use crap. And then
Yeah, Netflix invented all sorts of stuff, reactive sockets. Go look it up. If you find the right thing, you might even see one of my commits floating around on how it parsed in JavaScript. It happens.
I used crap and I couldn't make it work.
Big companies made plenty of bad
It was like,
decisions.
it was dropping jobs on the floor. Like, it's just like all these crazy bugs
Falcor.
happened. And then I was like, finally, I was like, I'm not using that anymore. I have to switch to
Crap
RabbitMQ
exists.
or whatever the heck the actually correct thing to use was.
Yeah, and like Ruby is an incredibly slow language, even like 10x slower than PHP, which was already too slow.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, basically, you should be so lucky to get to one.
Yeah. Is there an advantage for a
He is
technical
true.
founder
You should be so
be
lucky to get to
classically
one.
trained and be a really deep
Definitely.
systems thinker?
Well, I mean, a Toby or a Max Levchin is not going to get bullshitted by people. I'll tell
Patrick
you.
from Stripe is
Yeah.
the same.
I mean, I'll tell you a crazy story. When I
Hit me.
was at Palantir, I sort of burnt out there after a couple of years after I designed the logo, and then I actually, between that and going to
I know what he just said. I obviously do not know a lot of his backstory, but I swear I didn't just hear a couple years and a single logo, because that would be just absolutely design the logo and then burnt out after years of just doing a logo. I know.
No, that's not what he said. What he said was he was burnt out for years. So the last thing he did was that he made the logo and then left. Like, that was his last hurrah there. It wasn't the thing he did for 2 years. It was the last thing he did. Like, when I talk about my time leaving Twitch and how I burnt out and left, I say that I dropped the better mobile app and left. I didn't work on that for the last 4 years. It's just the last thing I did. I spent the last week of my time there on that last thing. I get what he was saying. Yeah, whatever.
How he framed it is probably not what he meant. But dude, that's crazy, dude. 2 years was definitely a joke. Definitely a joke. There's a joke. We're missing some inside baseball here.
to start my YC startup, I spent 6 months as a interaction designer, and it was this like terrible venture-backed company that ended up going in the ground, and it was like credit card software. It was the worst. I spent 6 months building like basically just interaction designs, which was really fun. That's what allowed me to work on my startup in my spare time, because I had a lot of spare time. But I remember designing, this faceted search thing for like rental cars or something like that. And then I go into my meeting with my dev manager and engineers who were going to implement it.
I just gotta pause it for a second. There has to be a joke in there. I refuse to believe that's anything but a joke. Dude, a circle with a chevron. Bam, got him. Gary, no. Gary!
They were like, oh, yeah, it can't be done. We can't do it that way. Oh, like, and I was like, what are you talking about? Just make the indexes like this. And they were like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, and then they looked up my resume.
Hear that going,
Yeah.
that from the interaction designer.
Yeah, basically, they're like, how did you know that? And I was like, you fucking lied to me. And that's the thing, like, what found
Did he just say use an index on a database? And people were like, oh my gosh! You know, just remember.
Okay, I very much sympathize with Gary here. The number of times I had to come into teams and be like, can we just do this obvious thing instead? This is so much work. And they'd say, no, wait, maybe? And then I would do it and show them and it worked. And they'd be like, what the fuck? But one of my favorite stories, actually, this is a Twitch one that is relevant here. You guys see this thing here, the activity feed? Watch what happens when I refresh. It's still there. That was not the case initially, because the way the activity feed worked was events were sent to it through the crazy queuing PubNub system that we had at Twitch, PubSub, whatever. It was a big open source thing that they built and released at the time. It was what it was. Because these were all events, they weren't persistent. They got sent when the thing happened. So when you refresh, you would lose them all. When the team working on this was pitched, hey, be nice if those persisted. The engineers were like, no, that's impossible. We'd have to build APIs with every different service across the company. We'd have to hit up the hype train guys in order to get this data. We'd have to hit up the guys over on the community sub team and the commerce team to get the sub information. We'd have to hit up viewer experience to have followers, creator experience to have the poll histories, all of these things. We can't do all of that in one API. That's not possible. To which the product manager said, well, if the events are being sent to us anyways, can't we just save them? The PM was the one who made the correct decision here. The PM was the one who made the suggestion to solve the goddamn problem. Just send the event to somewhere else we can store it at. And that was the moment that I just realized the two examples I have of someone coming in, saying the obvious thing, and it being the right solution were the same team. I might have to walk this one back and say that was just a shit engineering team. Almost every bad experience I had at Twitch was the same team. Anyways, ignore me.
There's probably a large number of people that are just slightly above competent enough to write syntax, and then the rest, man, it's a bleak world out there.
And when you're hiring people, that was like the wildest thing to me. But it was like sort of the ultimate lesson where it's like when you're in the workplace, you sort of assume that the people you bring on, like, they're not going to lie. They're not lazy. Like, we're all for the goal and the mission, right? And it's like, no, like, people who you hire, like, they totally will lie to you if you cannot tell that they're lying. And then
not another tangent. We're so close to the end. A thing I push really hard is my favorite hiring advice. I've been giving it much more, and I've rewired a lot of brains, and I'm very proud of this one piece of advice. You have to stop hiring for the thing you don't like doing. If you're hiring for the work you're bad at or don't like or want to avoid, your goal is to think less about the thing. So if you hire someone for that, you're not going to put as much work into hiring because you want to get someone faster, and you're not going to be as good of a manager for them because you don't want to talk about it, which puts them in a position where they benefit more from lying than growing. Because if they solve a hard let's say you hate sales. So you as a founder hire a sales guy to take over. They might solve a really hard sales problem and come to you really excited about it. And if you don't meet their excitement because you don't like sales, you just want to move on from the conversation, you're going to be like, yeah, good job, Billy. Thank you. And they're never going to tell you about one of those wins again because they're never going to have one of those wins again. You just guaranteed they don't care anymore. If you can't match their energy and excitement, you don't have to be as good as them. You have to be as excited as them. And if you can't be, they will either leave or they will stop caring. And one of those is less bad than the other. I would much rather they leave, because if you end up with that type of dead weight because the management doesn't respect the hard work they do, everything falls apart fast. So my counter advice to prevent this is hire for the thing you love. Hire for the thing you'll miss doing, because then you'll be a much better manager for that person. When I hired video editors for my channel and I wasn't a good editor, I didn't like editing, it did not work out for a bunch of different reasons. Then I started editing my own videos and I fell in love with it. I actually really genuinely enjoy editing video now. That's when it became the right time to hire, because I can nerd out with my editor phase all the time. And believe me, I do. It's fun for us, and like passing assets around and doing our own passes on stuff. It's a joyous, fun thing. And FaZe knows when he puts the time in to learn some new stuff and play with some new crazy animations and techniques, that he can show it to us and I'll be hyped about the work he did. It is rewarding for him to get better, not just because he can make better content, but because I'll recognize that work and have a conversation with him and be as excited as he is and also pay him way more fucking money when he does it. I have doubled his salary 3 times since he started because I've watched him grow and been there with him through it. Stop hiring for the shit you don't want to do because you're going to be a really bad manager for that person if you somehow manage to hire a good person, and you won't because you hate the thing. You just want to hire and move on. So stop hiring for shit you're bad at. Hire for what you're great at so you can fix the things you're bad at. Anyways.
He's right. By the way, this actually goes to, if you ever heard of Steve Jobs' Bozo Explosion, like he's absolutely right.
People were calling shit on me doubling his salary 3 times. Confirmed. Yeah. And when he first hit me up, his offer for his rate was way too low. So that's one of the 3s. I was like, no, I'm paying you way more than that. And have continued giving him more money whenever it possibly makes sense to. And honestly, probably going to give him more soon. He's been fucking killing it. FaZe runs the channel. None of this would be possible without him at this point. And that is only possible because I had to love editing. I could not have FaZe as an employee if I didn't love video editing. And I would not be a good manager for him if I wasn't either. So yeah, stop hiring for shit you don't like.
Really great kind of counterpoint. He's accidentally just like Uno reversing the entire beginning of this, which is that having a vibes-based, don't know really how to program programmer as somebody who is the one of the couple founders, like when they hire, they don't know how to hire well. That's the reality.
Okay, one really good question here. What if I'm really good about getting excited about the thing when they're excited, but I suck at doing the thing? That's fine. The way I phrase it is hire for the thing when you'll miss doing it. You don't have to be good at it, but you have to feel like you'll miss it. I wasn't a great editor when I brought FaZe on, but I was good enough that I could talk the talk and match the right energy levels. But more importantly, I was going to miss it because I loved doing it. I loved talking about it, thinking about it, all of those things. And if you don't have to be good at the thing to love it, I know a lot of people who love skateboarding way more than I do that are way worse at it than I am. You can absolutely love a thing that you're not great at yet, but try your best to get to that point where the thing excites you before you hire for it. And if you haven't done it enough to be excited about it, to feel why others do this for a living and why they enjoy it, that's the thing you have to fix. Get to the point where you love it. For me, I love writing code and I love engineering. So I have to hire for that first, so I stop doing it. I will live in the code base all day if I don't have people who will carry me through that part. By hiring Mark as my CTO, I now have to do other things because he's here to do the code part. Because I can't do code all day, I have to do everything else and get better at the things I'm bad at. And I've gotten pretty good at those things. I'm nearing the point where I could hire for some difficult stuff like sales. Honestly, support's more Mark's thing. He's phenomenal at support. He really likes it. I've been pushing him to start considering what it looks like for us to hire for it because I need him on engineering. I need him on the things he doesn't love as much. But all of this stuff is hard. Hiring sucks. Anytime awful. That was a really good question. I should have clarified that earlier. That was a phenomenal question.
So what do? You offload it onto some other company? Well, what is the other company's competency? How do you even know that the other company is competent enough to get you good engineers? Right? Like there's like a whole problem that is kind of ramping up there.
If you don't love engineering, you can't hire good engineers. You might somehow trick one into working for you, but they won't be there very long and they'll leave a fucking flaming path behind them as they leave where any decent engineers will follow them along the way. Bad engineers can't hire good engineers. Great engineers will have a much better time.
If you don't know what you're doing, you can't hire somebody to do that job well. That's why that's why somebody else usually comes in. That's why you usually, found with somebody that knows some other side. And that's why first-time founders tend to always be the worst because they don't know all the things that they need to know to be a founder of a company.
Trick one is a crazy thing to say. It is, but I've been tricked. I have absolutely been the good engineer that was tricked into thinking the place they were going was going to be awesome because people seemed excited and like they were aligned and they weren't. And I got scammed and I felt awful. And not only did I quit, I helped all the engineers that were decent there find other jobs afterwards. I burned a startup to the fucking ground because I got scammed. I absolutely have been tricked to join a company before, and I feel bad for anyone in that position. Weirdly common, and great engineers will destroy the company as they exit, not even intentionally, just because they feel so bad about the situation they're trapped in.
They often get screwed. They often take really bad deals. They often get just absolutely exploded. And then second-time founders are like, no. I know all these things. All these things have gone very, very wrong. Right. And so they're able to actually navigate those waters much, much better. So you can imagine that these people that have never actually been able to just be amazing at programming, they're not going to hire amazing programmers. I mean, they could get lucky, right? You can always get lucky. You can always get lucky. You can.
Yeah, this is the point I was really saying. Like, anyone could get lucky or trick someone into working for them that's good, but they will not stay. They will not retain. Luck does not result in retention. Luck is a very fickle thing, and luck will never result in long-term success. It only helps you in bursts. And those bursts won't carry you to anything great. Luck is massively overrated. It might get you kickstarted, but you still have to do the fucking work. And if you're lucky enough to accidentally hire a great engineer when you suck, you're not going to get any further than that.
Can always hire the right people by accident or with the good enough recommendation, or you have a friend that is somehow tied in that's able to get you the right stuff, right? That will always happen, but that's not a guarantee to happen if you don't know what you're doing.
Worst part is like you kind of have to call them on it. Like, sometimes you have workplace cultures that are so polite that people are like, oh, like I'm going to let that pass and then I'm going to talk shit about them behind their back.
That's
and
not polite.
No, you should fire them.
The AI agents, incidentally, will do
He's right.
exactly the same.
There was a take I read from, it might have not been one of the YC like posts, but it was either something a YC person posted or it was in one of the like videos on their channel. It's been fucking with my head since. When you hire someone, put a marker in your calendar for exactly 3 months after they joined, possibly even less, but it was 1 or 3 months. I can't remember which. We'll go with 3. At that 3-month mark, you need to reflect on the work they're doing. And the question you need to ask yourself is, can I imagine this team running without this person? If the answer isn't, no, what the fuck, I need them, it's probably time to let them go. And that was a tough thing for me to accept. That, like, if the person isn't so good that I feel like I would be failing without them, then you should probably let go of them. And I have, like, all of the employees we have at Ping right now, it's just me, Mark, and Julius. The company as it stands right now does not exist if any one of us 3 are gone. I cannot imagine how Ping, how Upload Thing, T3 Chat, all of that stuff works. If I lose either Mark or Julius, everything crumbles. And if we do bring on more people in the future, and I don't feel the same way 3 months into them being here, they will be gone as well. And it's terrifying to think that I might be hiring somebody and letting go of them 3 months later, but it's a very real problem, and it's one I have to be cognizant of if I hire again.
Same thing.
Yeah.
They will absolutely.
You should fire
the
them.
AI agents will bullshit you just like a human.
Fake politeness is actually I don't use the term polite for them. I use the term sinister. That's like what sinister actually like. That's what that means. It's or conniving.
This is one of the things Prime and I are by far the most aligned on. We both get frustrated with this one particular thing that a handful of people do. There are people in this general space that's whole aesthetic and optics are being the nice, positive guy, that behind the scenes are the most toxic fucking assholes causing nonstop problems. And it breaks my heart because there are some people that come off that kind and thoughtful and nice that are actually like that. Like Ken C. Dodds is the kindest fucking human being I've ever met. Anyone who ever talks any shit on Kent Dodds should be ignored because either they haven't met him and they're talking shit when they don't know any better, or they have and they're just lying through their teeth. Kent is actually like that. It's unbelievable. I've never met somebody who is so genuinely positive, and it breaks my heart that there are other people in this space that are seen in a similar light that are not at all like that behind closed doors. And I'm not going to say names because as soon as I start doing it, I'm going to end up in fucking trouble. But there are people that y'all watch a lot of videos from that come off as really nice that are fucking terrible behind the scenes.
Conniving would be another term for that.
Conniving and sinister. I totally agree with Prime here. We have been through it with these same people so many times now. Prime is much nicer than most of the nice guys in the space.
Toxic is not the right term because toxic is too stupid and too broad and has been taken over culturally. That just makes no sense. You need a better term.
And no, if somebody said, is it Linus? No, it's not Linus. Linus Tech Tips is awesome. And Linus comes off as an asshole too. Like Linus is almost exactly as nice as he comes off, like where it's, he'll complain pretty loudly, pretty quickly, but I find that it's easier to trust assholes because they're more obviously not hiding something. Because if they were, why would they be being an asshole? The nice guys I'm now inherently skeptical of because nobody's nice 100% of the time, other than Kent Dodds. Kent Dodds is actually like that. If I've never seen them talk shit, it's hard for me to trust them. It genuinely. If you've never seen somebody talk shit on a thing, you've never seen how they actually are.
Term for that. Machiavellian, you could I mean, there's a lot of terms you could use, but polite is not the right term, right? Defraud their benefactor might be a better one. Ninth circle of Dante's Inferno is a good description.
Employee will if you're not technical enough to like call them out on their bullshit and be like
There's a question here. If you see people talking smack about others, that means they'll do it about you. The only thing worse than someone talking shit on you is somebody publicly acting like they're cool with you and then privately being terrible. That gap between the two, or even worse, they're nice to you when they're with you, but they talk shit behind the scenes on you. Those are the people that are super toxic and terrible behind the scenes. Avoid those fuckers the best you can. If they are the exact same publicly and privately, and publicly they're not trying to put off a certain image, then yeah, they're much more likely to be trustworthy. But from my experience, having talked to all of our heroes and been in the space for fucking ever, the people who are really positive are very different behind the scenes most of the time. The reason I keep citing Kent is he is a fucking angel. That dude it is so unreal how thoughtful and kind he is. For every Kent, there are 10 people pretending to be Kent who are actually fucking terrible. And the people who act like Prime and me behind the scenes are usually even more positive than they expect. I even got the feedback from Prime early on that I came off much more of an asshole online than I am in person. How do you suss these people out? Don't trust people who are overly positive unless there's people who are negative who have defended them. That, like, it's shitty to say it this way, but like the only reason that you can differentiate Kent from other similarly kind seeming people is because you have the kind people as well as assholes like me all coming out massively defending Kent because he is awesome. And if you don't get people like me doing that, or you haven't met them yourself and seen how they handle things that they don't agree with, like this shit. Kent added me today as a friend on Discord to say hey and tell me he appreciated my work out of nothing. Kent called me one day just to thank me for something I had talked about that he thought was really well done, and he just wanted to know that he liked the work I had done. And this was like early. I was still a nobody at the time. It broke me. He's so fucking good. I don't want to just spend the rest of this glazing Kent, but I actually consider doing a video like an ode to Kent Dodds because he represents something very special, not just in software, but in general. And I want to draw a line between him and people who act like him but aren't, because he is a gem. I've been talking about Kent for like 10 minutes now. Let's finish this up.
Like, no, like you didn't make the change that I asked you for. It goes back to your point about like why being classically trained is still helpful. Like you have to be able to call out all the people working for you, whether they're human or not. Being technical enough to be able to do that is a superpower.
So just to wrap up,
My boss, by the way, at Netflix, he was actually really good at this. He was shockingly good. My last boss, Chris Wine, highly praised the man. Awesome boss. Really knew what was going on. He was really, really good at it. And this is one of those things that he was just super, super good at. And I absolutely loved. I absolutely loved what he did. He was just so dang good. So I always appreciated that you could have like really deep technical discussions, and he would be right up there just doing it was just so good.
Yeah, I was really lucky with my management at Twitch. All but one of my managers were like this, where even when they weren't coding, they were so deeply technical that they could talk about hard systems problems in places they didn't even understand and be a really good sounding board and like dig through deep stuff with you. And it was the best. And I just thought that's what an engineering manager was for my first 5 years of my career, because I hadn't had a bad one yet.
It was actually really, really fun. Yeah, Chris Wine, W-I-E-N or E-I-N. E-I-N, W-E-I-N. Very, very good. Very great boss.
on with
I have nothing but actually...
all these tools giving superpowers to the best engineers and making the bad engineers also worse, this is a quote from the founder of Train Loop. How coding has changed 6 to 1 month ago.
We had these
10x
exact
speed
same
up.
glasses
Now,
at Netflix.
1 month ago, 100x speed up. Now it's exponential acceleration.
It sort of crept up on us, actually.
Yeah, it was like somebody dropped some like
I would not want a founder that thinks AI sped them up 100x.
giant beanstalk seeds.
I would literally just not
we
work
woke
for
up
that
in the
company
morning.
unless if I had to. Right? If I had a choice.
So,
If I had a choice.
I mean, I think our sense right now is this isn't a fad. This isn't going away. This is actually the dominant way to code. And if you're not doing it, like, you might just be left behind. This is just here to stay. And
You won't be left behind. Tools are going to vastly change. I mean, honestly, think about Claude 3.5 when it came out versus what you have now. All of your Claude 3.5 skills are completely worthless. The speed of change also is the speed of your skills going out the window. So just don't forget that. It's not that. And now notice that the difference between, like, honestly, like, you truly...
No, low level. Palantir guy's not useless. Gary's the best. He just had interesting comments in this video. I fucking love Gary. I've been planning a podcast episode with him for a while, like on his, not mine, to be clear. I don't have a fucking podcast. But Gary has so much genuinely useful insight on so many things. This just clearly went past his area. Yeah, Gary's good. Wait for our talk. I think you guys will be impressed with how thoughtful he is with that. He knows his stuff, just not necessarily for this.
You aren't being left behind. Left behind from what? Prompting skills? No, you're being left behind when Jesus comes back, and now Kirk Cameron's going to star in a pretty crappily produced movie called Left Behind. Honestly, you just weren't prepared for Jesus coming back. That's actually what they mean. And so I'm sorry. The Antichrist is here. We're all going to die. Mark of the Beast is actually Sam Altman's Jippity 4 butthole logo. Like, that's what's going to happen. It's just pretty bad. It's a pretty bad future. Here we are. I know, everybody. That's what it is. Go right on our foreheads. Big old butthole. Damn. Crazy. Okay. I mean, there was a lot of good insight in this. I think I think the big thing is that they see the world from a vastly different perspective than, say, I do. And so it's always really good to see someone else's perspective. And I realize that there's a lot, like most of the world, the value of coding is not, or the value of becoming a good engineer is not to become a good engineer. The value of a good engineer is to become someone who can make a cajillion dollars, right? Or at least for these people, the value is for them to be able to hire you and hopefully make a 100x return on their money. And so it's just like, you know, that you got to remember that. You got to remember that. And so that is a good piece of takeaway for you, especially if you're looking for a job or you're looking to be relevant, is what are they actually asking for in here? That's like, it's a good insight into where the popular so-called future is right now. And so I don't know. It's just something that's kind of interesting. And it makes me realize, like right now, I'm probably the worst I am at launching and building a website, but I'm the best I am at building a tool, right? To solve weird problems.
This is, I think, like the biggest gap between me and Prime right now is I'm writing more code right now than I've written in a long time, especially the beginning of this year. I wrote more code in January than I wrote for like half of 2024. I'm locked in right now. I am better at building a website. I am better at building system architecture. I'm better at scaling systems. I'm better at team like navigation bullshit drama because of all the investing and advisory work I do. There isn't much that I was better at last year than now. And that's a thing I've been not thinking enough about. But I do actually at the moment feel like the tools I'm using, the way I'm thinking, the work I'm doing, and the stuff I'm building, I'm better on all accounts. My upload schedule is less consistent. I guess there's that, but otherwise, I'm fucking firing on all cylinders right now, and I just want to see how long I can go. I had my first burnout moment in a bit a few weeks ago, and I'm coming out of it, doing pretty well, but like managing the chaos that is whatever the fuck my life is now is the biggest challenge I have day to day. But I don't have a family relying on me and all the other things that make Prime's life much more important to maintain than the chaos that is mine. I can entirely change the way I live my life any given week, and it's okay. So just differences, things I think a lot about, but I'm really locked in on the engineering side right now and helping a bunch of different businesses figure their shit out and scale. So yeah, I'm really proud of the work I've been doing lately and the things I've been putting out, be it random CLI tools, actual web pages that people use, crazy stuff like T3 chat, and everything in between.
And so it's just like, okay, but is that a skill set that's in vogue? It's probably less in vogue at smaller companies. And so I'm not there. If I wanted to try to make a switch into a startup, I'm going to need to change what is my vogue set of tooling, which is that I need to have the ultimate ability to be able to scale and build, say, websites and go full, don't care about my credit card and throw it onto some auto-scaling serverless, blah, 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 blah. You can't launch a website. I can't launch a website easily, right? I can use Laravel Cloud and do all that and get that up and running. I'm sure I could learn Next.js in a day and a half and go and launch something very fantastic with Next.js. It's just not a skill set that I want to use, right? It's not something I want to go and get better and better at. Like, I don't want to get great at React again. Okay, I was great at React. I don't want to be great anymore at React. It's not something that brings me joy or fulfillment or makes me excited about coding. And so I've kind of oriented myself into building tools for other developers. Like, that's what I've always liked. That's just who I am. That's where I am. That's what I want. But listening to them, like, you got to realize that that skill set is not necessarily a great founder skill set. There are lots of founding companies, thinking of Terso. By the way, they don't pay me anymore. Not sponsored, but I still highly recommend them.
You have equity. You still got to disclose it, bud.
Terso, very technical.
I say, even though I forget half the time, it's fine. I'm just joking. But like the disclosure and the bias stuff is, all this stuff's a mess.
Right? The founders, Linux core contributors for decades, they're awesome, right? Hashtag not a bad. And so it's just like, you got to kind of, there are what you're missing here is also startups that are deeply technical, that all of what they're saying is actually kind of worthless. It's actually not going to be going the way you think it's going. Anyways, great talk.
I'll let him wrap up. I have one additional thing after.
Good job. Good job, Gary. I loved your logo. I still can't believe he spent 2 years on developing that very beautiful logo. I mean, dude, 2 years? I don't even think I could develop that in 5 years. That's crazy good. I mean, this is the best I've ever seen. A gen.
Obviously, very interesting, insightful, chaotic mess. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. Actually, editor, put a coupon code here for 3 months of T3 chat for half off so we can give something to the people who suffered all the way through here. Anyways, on one hand, it's really interesting hearing the perspective of all these companies that claim they had 80 to 95% of their code written by AI. What I want to hear is the other side. I would love a similar follow-up, maybe not through IC, but whoever has the right access to do it, to see what things are like for the companies that said less than 10 or 20% nowadays. What does a company look like that formed itself and got into YC over the last year that is doing something so hard, so absurd, deep, unique, and technical that the AI tools only hurt them when they try to use them? I want to see those companies. What are they doing and what are they building right now? Because I bet those ones are going to be full of even more interesting insights. I've talked enough about AI forever at this point. This was supposed to take an hour and a half, and I think that's a lot longer than that. It's almost 9 p.m. here, so I'm going to go. Thanks for sticking through, and until next time, peace, nerds.